Emily's heart skipped a beat as she opened the elegant wedding invitation and saw Jack's name on the guest list. Memories of their passionate love and painful divorce surged back, leaving her torn. Should she face her ex-husband after 5 years? Despite her stable new life, Emily yearned for closure. As the wedding day approached, anxiety bubbled, but she resolved to attend, steeling herself for the encounter. The picturesque venue and familiar faces couldn't distract her from Jack's presence. Their dance and raw conversations that night brought healing, understanding, and a peaceful resolution, allowing Emily to embrace a hopeful new beginning. Hello, my friends. I hope all you are fine. This is Narrative Stories channel. Let's start this story. Emily stood at her kitchen counter, absently sipping her morning coffee, when she noticed an elegant cream-colored envelope among her usual pile of bills and junk mail. The handwriting on the envelope was unmistakably Sarah's, her college roommate, and one of her oldest friends. Emily's curiosity piqued as she carefully opened the envelope and pulled out an intricately designed wedding invitation. As she read the details, her eyes widened in surprise and apprehension. The invitation was for Sarah's wedding, a joyous occasion to be sure, but her heart sank when she saw Jack's name on the guest list. Jack, her ex-husband, the man she had once envisioned spending her entire life with, would be there too. Mixed emotions surged through Emily, memories of their passionate love, their wedding day, and the eventual unraveling of their marriage flooded her mind. It had been 5 years since their painful divorce, and although time had dulled the sharp edges of her grief, the thought of seeing Jack again stirred a pot of emotions she had long tried to suppress. She placed the invitation back on the counter, taking a deep breath. Should she attend? The idea of facing Jack after all these years was daunting, yet something inside her whispered that this might be the closure she needed. She decided to give herself time to reflect before making a decision. For days, Emily wrestled with her decision. Every time she thought about attending the wedding, anxiety bubbled up within her. She would have to confront the man who had once been her everything and had also been the source of her deepest pain. Emily recalled their tumultuous marriage, filled with passionate highs and devastating lows. They had loved fiercely, but also hurt each other deeply. Their breakup had left her shattered, but over the years, she had painstakingly rebuilt her life, piece by piece. Now, she was stable, with a fulfilling job, a cozy apartment, and a supportive circle of friends. As the wedding date approached, Emily weighed her options. She could skip the event and avoid the emotional turmoil of seeing Jack. But a part of her yearned for the chance to see him again, to gauge how much they both had changed, and perhaps to find some closure. After much contemplation, she decided to go. This wedding would be a test of her emotional strength, a way to prove to herself that she had moved on. Emily knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to face her past head-on, no matter how uncomfortable it might be. She RSVP'd yes and began preparing herself mentally for the encounter. The day of the wedding arrived, and Emily found herself driving through scenic countryside to reach the picturesque venue. Nestled among rolling hills and blooming wildflowers, the location was as enchanting as Sarah had always dreamed. As Emily stepped out of her car, a wave of nostalgia washed over her. She had attended so many weddings with Jack, and now here she was, alone. Clad in a simple yet elegant dress, she took a deep breath and walked towards the gathering crowd. Familiar faces greeted her with warm smiles, and she exchanged pleasantries with old friends, feeling a mix of comfort and trepidation. As she made her way to her seat, she spotted Jack standing across the lawn, talking to a group of guests. Their eyes met briefly, and in that fleeting moment, a flurry of old emotions stirred within her. Jack looked much the same, perhaps a bit more mature, with a touch of gray at his temples. She quickly averted her gaze, focusing instead on the ceremony that was about to begin. Sarah, looking radiant in her wedding gown, walked down the aisle, and the beautiful ceremony unfolded with heartfelt vows and loving glances. Despite the joyous occasion, Emily found herself distracted by the thought of Jack's presence, the memories of their past dancing at the edges of her consciousness. With the ceremony concluded, the reception commenced in a beautifully decorated marquee. Guests mingled, the air filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses. Emily wandered through the crowd, feeling a strange mix of belonging and isolation. As she approached the cocktail bar, she saw Jack making his way toward her. Her heart raced, but she managed a polite smile. "Hi, Emily," Jack greeted her, his voice carrying a hint of the familiarity they once shared. "It's good to see you." "Hi, Jack," Emily replied, her tone equally polite but strained. They exchanged the usual pleasantries about their lives since the divorce, each trying to sound casual while their minds raced with unspoken thoughts. Emily's friends soon pulled her away into lively conversations, but she couldn't shake the awareness of Jack's presence. Every time she glanced around the room, her eyes seemed to find him. As the evening wore on and the dance floor opened up, Emily found herself standing on the sidelines, watching the couples sway to the music. Suddenly, she felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to see Jack standing there, his hand extended in invitation. "May I have this dance?" he asked. Emily hesitated, a thousand thoughts running through her mind, but she eventually placed her hand in his. It was time to break the ice. Emily felt a rush of mixed emotions as she and Jack moved onto the dance floor. The band played a slow melodic tune, and they began to sway in unison. The initial awkwardness hung between them like a thick fog, but as they settled into the rhythm, the tension began to ease. "You look great, Emily," Jack said softly, his eyes searching hers for a reaction. "Thank you," she replied, offering a small smile. "You do too." They started with small talk about their lives since the divorce. Jack mentioned his new job and how he had moved to a different city. Emily spoke about her career advancements and the supportive friends she had made. As they danced, the familiarity of their movements brought back memories of happier times. Gradually, the conversation turned deeper, and they decided to step outside for some fresh air and privacy. Finding a quiet corner in the garden, Emily and Jack continued their conversation. They began to delve into the reasons behind their separation, discussing the misunderstandings and the mistakes they both had made. Emily spoke about the hurt she felt when Jack's career ambitions overshadowed their relationship, while Jack admitted to not realizing how much he had neglected her needs. The conversation was raw and honest, each revelation peeling back layers of old wounds. As the night deepened, the emotions between Emily and Jack became more intense. "I regret a lot of things," Jack confessed, his voice tinged with sorrow. "I was so focused on my career that I lost sight of what really mattered. I never intended to hurt you, but I see now how much I did." Emily felt tears welling up, but held them back, determined to stay composed. "I was hurt, Jack, deeply, but I've also had time to heal and reflect. I realize now that I had my own faults too. I depended on you for my happiness instead of finding it within myself." They continued to share their feelings, each word helping to mend the fractures in their hearts. Emily talked about how she had changed over the years, learning to be more independent and self-reliant. Jack spoke about his own journey of self-discovery and how he had learned to value relationships over ambitions. They began to see their past from each other's perspectives, understanding the pain they had caused, but also recognizing the love they once shared. Through this heartfelt dialogue, Emily and Jack started to acknowledge that their relationship, while flawed, had been an important chapter in their lives. They realized that their separation had been a catalyst for personal growth, pushing them to become better versions of themselves. This understanding brought a sense of peace and acceptance that had eluded them for years. As the night drew to a close, Emily and Jack reached a mutual understanding. They agreed that while their time together had been meaningful, they had both grown in different directions. "We had something special, Emily," Jack said, his voice gentle. "But I think we've both found our paths now. I'm glad we had this chance to talk." "Me too, Jack," Emily replied, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. I think we both needed this closure. They shared a final dance, this time with a sense of peace and resolution. The music played softly in the background as they moved together, the tension and pain of the past melting away. It was a dance of forgiveness, of letting go, and of acknowledging that while their journey together had ended, it had shaped who they had become. Emily left the wedding feeling lighter, a sense of serenity replacing the turmoil that had lingered for so long. She hugged Sarah goodbye, thanking her for inviting her to the wedding. "You look happy, Emily," Sarah remarked, noticing the change in her friend's demeanor. "I think I am," Emily replied with a genuine smile. "I finally feel like I've closed that chapter." The next morning, Emily woke up with a sense of clarity and renewal. She reflected on the previous night's events, feeling a profound sense of peace. The conversation with Jack had been cathartic, allowing her to release the lingering pain and resentment she had harbored. Emily realized that she was ready to fully embrace her future, unburdened by the ghosts of her past. As she went about her day, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose. She returned to her normal routine with a fresh perspective, appreciating the stability and joy she had built in her life. The closure she had found at the wedding allowed her to move forward with confidence and hope. She looked forward to new beginnings, content with the understanding that she had gained from her past experiences. The story ends with Emily standing on the balcony of her apartment, gazing out at the city skyline. She smiles, feeling a sense of fulfillment and readiness for whatever the future might hold. The chapter with Jack was finally closed, and she was prepared to write new chapters in her life, filled with hope, growth, and the promise of new adventures. Thank you for being a part of Narrative Stories. Your support and engagement mean the world to us. We are committed to bringing you the best in storytelling. What kinds of stories would you like to see next? Share your thoughts in the comments below.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
For 14 years, I lived with my wife and son, believing we were a happy family. But everything changed when I discovered that Alex, the boy I've raised and loved as my own, isn't actually my biological son. Linda, my wife, left me, taking Alex with her, because his biological father, now wealthy, entered the picture. Suddenly, they've decided they can be a happy family, and I've been painted as a bad father to justify their actions. But then something unexpected happened. Alex said something in court that revealed a shocking truth, one I never saw coming. I never thought I'd be in a situation like this. My life has been turned completely upside down, and I'm struggling to make sense of it all. Let me start at the beginning. I'm Mike, 35-year-old man, and until yesterday, I believed I had a good life. I've been married to Linda for 14 years, and we have a 14-year-old son, Alex. Linda and I got married when she found out she was pregnant. It wasn't planned, but I was ready to step up and be a father. From the moment Alex was born, I loved him with everything I had. I was there for all of his milestones, his first steps, his first words, and everything in between. I worked 2 jobs to ensure he had the best life possible, never doubting for a moment that he was my son. It wasn't always easy, but I never complained. That's what fathers do, right? I always tried my best to be a good dad. I helped Alex with his homework, taught him how to ride a bike, and cheered him on at all his soccer games. Every summer, we had our father-son camping trips, just the 2 of us. Those moments were some of the happiest of my life. I wasn't a perfect father, but I always put my family first. I made sure Alex had everything he needed for school, even if it meant skipping lunch at work. Last year, I saved up for months to buy him the latest game console for his birthday. The joy on his face when he opened it made every extra shift worth it. Linda and I had our ups and downs like any couple, but I thought we were happy. Just last month, we celebrated our 14th wedding anniversary with a quiet dinner at home. Alex even made us a card, which we proudly displayed on the fridge, or at least, it was there yesterday. Yesterday started like any other day. I went to my first job in the morning and my second job in the afternoon, looking forward to dinner with my family. But when I got home, something felt wrong. The house was eerily quiet. Normally, Alex would be watching TV or playing video games, and Linda would be in the kitchen. But this time, there was nothing. No sounds, no smells of dinner cooking, just silence. I called out for them, but no one answered. I went to Alex's room, thinking maybe he was wearing headphones and hadn't heard me. But his room was empty. Some of his clothes and favorite books were missing. My heart started racing as I went to our bedroom. That's when I saw the note on the bedside table, written in Linda's handwriting. My hands shook as I picked it up and started to read. The words have been echoing in my mind ever since. In the note, Linda revealed that she and Alex were leaving me. But that wasn't even the worst part. She confessed that I'm not Alex's biological father. She explained that, before we got together, she had a brief relationship with another man. When she found out she was pregnant, she assumed the baby was mine. She said she convinced herself it was true because she wanted it to be true. But now, 14 years later, Alex's biological father has come back into the picture. Linda wrote that he wanted to be a part of their lives, and she had decided to give him that chance. She claimed that Alex deserved to know his real father. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning as I sat down on the bed, trying to process the words I had just read. How could this be happening? How could Linda do this to me? Do this to us? Desperately, I kept reading the note, hoping for some explanation that might make sense of it all. Linda wrote that she was sorry for lying to me all these years. She admitted she knew it was wrong, but said she had been scared. Scared of losing me and scared of being a single mother. Now, however, she felt that Alex's biological father, who was apparently successful, could offer them a better life. She also wrote that Alex was excited about meeting his real dad and starting a new chapter. That part shattered me the most. For the past 14 hours, I've been trying to wrap my head around all of this. I've gone through every emotion imaginable: shock, anger, sadness, betrayal. I've cried more in the last day than I have in my entire life. I can't stop thinking about all the moments I shared with Alex, teaching him how to tie his shoelaces, staying up all night when he was sick, cheering him on at his soccer games. Were all those moments a lie? I keep wondering if Alex ever suspected anything. Did he ever feel like I wasn't his real dad? Did Linda ever drop any hints? I thought we had a great relationship, but now I'm questioning everything. I've tried calling and texting both Linda and Alex, but their phones are turned off. I even drove by Linda's parents' house, hoping they might be there, but there was no sign of them. It feels like my entire life has been a lie. For 14 years, I poured my heart and soul into being a husband and a father. I worked tirelessly to provide for my family, often pushing myself to the brink. And now, in the blink of an eye, it's all gone. I don't know what to do anymore. The house feels so empty without them. I've taken a few days off work because I just can't focus on anything. I keep wishing this was all some horrible nightmare, and that I'll wake up to find them here with me. Part of me wants to fight for my family. Alex may not be my biological son, but I've raised him for 14 years. Doesn't that mean something? But then I think about Linda's betrayal, and I'm not sure if I could ever trust her again. I've thought about hiring a lawyer, but I have no idea where to even begin. Do I have any legal rights as Alex's non-biological father? Can Linda just take him away like this without any consideration for me? I feel lost, overwhelmed, and unsure of what steps to take. I've also considered trying to find them, but I'm torn. If Alex truly wants to be with his biological father, do I have the right to interfere? The thought of never seeing him again is breaking me, but I also want what's best for him. I'm furious at Linda for lying to me all these years. I'm devastated that she could just leave without giving me a chance to talk or work through this. But most of all, my heart aches for Alex. He's my son. Biology doesn't change that. I've loved him and raised him for 14 years. How can that bond just be erased? I've thought about reaching out to Linda's family or some of our mutual friends, but I feel so embarrassed and ashamed. I don't even know how to begin explaining what has happened. I feel like such a fool for not realizing the truth all these years. And now, a terrible thought haunts me. What if everyone else knew? What if Linda's family or our friends were aware and kept it from me? I don't think I could handle that level of betrayal on top of everything else. There's also a part of me that's angry at Alex's biological father. Where has he been for the past 14 years? Why is he deciding to come back into the picture now? Did he know about Alex all along and just chose to stay away? I have so many questions, but no way to get any answers. I'm scared for Alex, too. He's leaving behind everything he's ever known. His school, his friends, his home. Is this really the best thing for him? And what about his biological father? What kind of person is he? Will he love and care for Alex the way I have all these years? The house feels so unbearably empty without them. I haven't even been able to step into Alex's room. His soccer trophies are still on the shelf, and his dirty laundry is still in the hamper. It's like they left in a hurry, leaving pieces of their lives, and mine, behind. A few weeks later, I received divorce papers from Linda. Even though I had expected it, seeing it all laid out in black and white was devastating. It made everything feel so final, so painfully real. Once the initial shock wore off, I knew I couldn't just sit back and let them take Alex away from me without a fight. I had been his father for 14 years, and I wasn't about to give up that role without doing everything I could. I decided to hire a lawyer, even though it was a huge financial strain, especially with Linda and Alex gone. I managed to find an attorney who was willing to work with me on a payment plan. He was honest from the beginning, warning me that the road ahead would be an uphill battle because I wasn't Alex's biological father. Still, I was determined to try. The courtroom was heavy with tension as the proceedings continued, and the words spoken felt like daggers aimed at my heart. Linda's attorney had already painted a picture of me as a father who was neglectful and absent, and now it was Logan's turn to add fuel to the fire. Logan's attorney, a sharply dressed woman with a commanding presence, stood up and addressed the judge. "Your Honor," she began, "we have presented overwhelming evidence that Mr. Thompson's work schedule is a major factor in his inability to provide the emotional support and care that Alex needs. Working 2 jobs may demonstrate financial responsibility, but it also speaks volumes about Mr. Thompson's absence in his child's life." She turned to the judge with a slight, knowing smile, as if she had just delivered the final blow. "It is clear that Mr. Thompson prioritizes his own work over the well-being of his son. In contrast, my client, Mr. Logan, has the means to give Alex the life he deserves. A life full of opportunities, financial security, and an environment where he can thrive." Logan sat across the room, arms folded, looking smug and self-assured. I could feel the weight of his wealth and status pressing down on me, making the battle even harder to fight. The judge nodded, considering the argument. "I understand the point being made, but I also recognize that financial stability is not the only factor in determining what is best for a child." Linda's attorney chimed in, presenting a set of witnesses who had been called to testify against me. One by one, they stepped onto the stand, each offering their version of events. One of them, a woman who had been a family friend of Linda's, was the first to speak. "I've seen Mr. Thompson with Alex on several occasions," she said, her voice firm but accusatory. "There were times when he would ignore Alex completely. I remember one afternoon at a family gathering when Alex was trying to talk to him, but Mr. Thompson just walked away. It was clear to me that he wasn't interested in his son's life." My heart sank as I listened to the testimony. I remembered that afternoon. I had been exhausted after working back-to-back shifts, and all I had wanted was a few minutes of peace. But to hear it twisted into an accusation that I didn't care about Alex, it was crushing. Another witness took the stand, a man who claimed to be a close friend of Logan's. His testimony was more direct. "Alex deserves better than what Mr. Thompson can provide," he said bluntly. "Logan has the financial means to give Alex a comfortable, privileged life. I've seen Alex with Logan, and he's treated like royalty. It's clear to me that Alex would be better off with Logan." I felt my stomach churn with anger. It wasn't just about money. It was about love, devotion, and the everyday sacrifices I made for Alex. I couldn't let these people rewrite our history, and I couldn't let their version of events determine the outcome of this case. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "Your Honor, I've spent my entire life making sure Alex had everything he needed. Yes, I work 2 jobs, but that's because I want to provide for him. I don't want him to go without. I've never, not once, turned my back on him. I've been there for every school event, every birthday, every important moment in his life. And I will continue to be there, no matter what." I looked at Alex, sitting quietly beside me, his eyes wide with a mix of confusion and sadness. My heart ached for him. He didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of this. "I've made mistakes, but I'm his father," I said, my voice breaking. "I've loved him every day since the moment he was born, and I will never stop fighting for him. Money isn't what makes a parent. Love and commitment are." The judge nodded thoughtfully, and for the first time, I felt like I had been heard. The next few moments were a blur, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't give up. Alex needed me, and I was going to keep fighting for him, no matter how hard it got. As the trial wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing control of everything I had worked so hard to build. Every word, every accusation, felt like another weight added to my shoulders. I tried to stay calm, but deep down, it felt like the walls were closing in on me. Logan's attorney was relentless. Each time I spoke up in my defense, she countered with some new angle designed to make me look incapable. She tried to portray every aspect of my life as a failure, spinning my efforts into weaknesses. Working long hours to provide for my family was no longer an act of dedication. It was evidence of my absence. My sacrifices, my commitment to being the best father I could be, seemed irrelevant in their eyes. I had always thought that providing for my son, creating memories with him, was what mattered most. But in that courtroom, it felt like everything I had ever believed in was being turned against me. The camping trips I'd taken Alex on, our annual tradition, were suddenly trivialized, dismissed as cheap vacations meant to cover up the fact that I couldn't give him the material comforts that Logan could. It was like none of it mattered. At one point, the attorney presented a statement from a neighbor, someone I barely knew, who claimed that she had once seen me in a heated argument with Alex. The woman exaggerated the situation, making it sound like I had been neglecting Alex emotionally, when the truth was far more mundane. We had argued over something minor, as any father and son might, but now it was being used against me. Every piece of evidence they presented seemed to strip me of my dignity. It was as if everything I had done for my son, all the little things that made me a father, were being erased and replaced with a false narrative. The overwhelming weight of it all threatened to break me. I glanced over at Alex, sitting quietly beside me, his face pale and full of confusion. I could tell he was processing everything, trying to understand why these people he knew and trusted, were saying these things about me. I wanted to reach out, to reassure him that none of this was true, but I didn't want to add to the burden he was already carrying. Your Honor, I said, my voice shaking but determined, everything I've done, every decision I've made, has been for Alex. I may not be perfect, but I love him. I've never stopped fighting for him. The trips, the time we've spent together, those moments meant everything to us. I may not have the wealth that Logan has, but I have something far more valuable, a bond with my son that no amount of money can buy. There was a long silence in the courtroom. The judge seemed to consider my words carefully. I wasn't sure if he would buy it. It felt like I was losing, but I refused to stop fighting. For Alex, for myself, I had to keep going, no matter how hard it was. But inside, the doubt crept in. Was it enough? Could I overcome their version of the truth? My lawyer fought hard, but we were completely outmatched. Logan's wealth gave him access to every advantage. They brought in expert witnesses to testify about the importance of biological connections, and child psychologists who argued that Alex would be better off in a household with greater financial stability. It felt like they had prepared for every possible angle, leaving me defenseless. I started bracing myself for the worst, that I might lose Alex forever. The thought of never seeing him again, of someone else raising him and hearing him call another man dad, was almost too much to bear. I spent countless sleepless nights, lying awake and thinking about all the moments I would miss. His first day of high school, his big achievements, and even the everyday conversations we shared. But then, something completely unexpected happened. The judge announced that he wanted to hear from Alex himself. I was terrified. What if Linda and Logan had turned Alex against me? What if he said he wanted to live with them? I didn't know if I could bear hearing Alex say he didn't want me in his life anymore. As he took the stand, I could barely breathe, my heart pounding in my chest. But what happened next changed everything. Alex looked directly at the judge and said, I want to live with my dad. My real dad. The one who raised me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Alex continued, describing how I had always been there for him. He talked about our camping trips and how much they meant to him, how I always made time to help him with his homework, even when I was exhausted from work. He shared memories of me cheering him on at every soccer game, teaching him how to ride a bike, and making him feel loved and supported in every way. Then, Alex dropped a bombshell that stunned the entire courtroom. He revealed that his mom and Logan had been trying to coach him on what to say in court. He said he overheard them late at night, planning how to make me look bad. They told him to claim I was neglectful, that I didn't care about his education, and that I was always angry and tired. Alex said he couldn't go through with it. He told the court that none of it was true, and that he couldn't lie about the person who had been there for him his entire life. He even shared specific conversations he had overheard, where Linda and Logan discussed ways to manipulate evidence and testimonies against me. The courtroom fell completely silent. I could see the shock and disbelief on Linda and Logan's faces. The judge listened carefully, asking Alex several questions to clarify what he had heard and experienced. In the tense silence of the courtroom, Alex's voice broke through, steady but filled with emotion as he recalled what he had overheard. His eyes stayed focused on the judge, but I could see the weight of his words on his face. Your Honor, Alex began, his voice quiet but clear. I overheard a conversation between Logan and my mom, Linda. Logan was suggesting that they could pay off some of my coworkers to testify against my dad. He said they could claim that my dad complained about me all the time, that he wasn't interested in my life, and that he didn't care about me. My mom didn't like the idea at first, but Logan kept convincing her, saying it was the only way they'd win the case. I could hear the shakiness in Alex's voice as he continued, his fists clenched at his sides. And then, they started talking about my teachers. They wanted to get them to lie, say that my dad never showed up for parent-teacher conferences. But that's not true. He always made time for me, even when he had to take time off work. He was always there, and I know that. Alex paused, his gaze drifting down for a moment before he looked back up at the judge, his voice faltering with the weight of what he had to say next. It made me feel scared, Your Honor. I didn't know who to trust, and I started to feel confused, like everything I knew about my dad and what he's done for me didn't matter to anyone. I could feel the tightness in my chest as Alex spoke. His words hit harder than I ever expected. I could see the judge's eyes soften, his expression grave, as he absorbed what Alex was revealing. Alex took a deep breath before continuing, his words heavy with sincerity. But I missed my dad. I missed the way things used to be. I missed him being there for me. And I just couldn't pretend that any of what Logan and my mom were saying was true. It wasn't right. The courtroom was still, every eye on Alex, as he spoke his truth. The judge's expression turned serious, his gaze never leaving Alex. After a long pause, the judge finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. Thank you, Alex. Your testimony is important. I could see Linda and Logan's lawyer shift uncomfortably in their seats. Linda and Logan whispered urgently to each other, their faces filled with panic. They clearly hadn't expected Alex's testimony to shift the case so dramatically. The judge's decision was swift. He ordered an investigation into Linda and Logan's attempts to manipulate a minor's testimony, their unethical tactics now laid bare. The courtroom, once tense with uncertainty, now hummed with the realization that the truth had a way of emerging, no matter how hard others tried to bury it. The judge said he would take a few days to review all the evidence in Alex's testimony before making a decision. Those were some of the longest and most agonizing days of my life. I felt a glimmer of hope after hearing Alex speak, but I was terrified to let myself believe that things might actually work out in my favor. Finally, the day of the judge's decision arrived. As we all gathered in the courtroom, I was a bundle of nerves. The judge began by stating that he had carefully reviewed all the evidence presented and had taken Alex's heartfelt testimony into account. The judge sat at the bench, his voice steady but filled with gravity as he addressed the courtroom. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his eyes scanning the room. While financial stability is certainly a factor in determining what is best for a child, it is not the sole determinant. In this case, it is clear that the most important factor is the well-being of the child involved. The judge looked at me, his gaze direct. Mr. Thompson, it has been shown that you have consistently provided for Alex's needs. Even when that meant working 2 jobs, you did so without hesitation. You made sacrifices, but never at the expense of your child's care and well-being. Your commitment to Alex's education, his extracurricular activities, and ensuring that you made time for him are all qualities that demonstrate your dedication as a father. I could feel a wave of relief wash over me as he spoke. For so long, I had feared that my financial struggles would be used against me, but the judge seemed to understand the lengths I had gone to in order to be there for Alex. He continued, his tone turning more serious. However, I must also address the actions of the opposing parties. It has come to light that Ms. Linda and Mr. Logan made repeated attempts to manipulate the testimony of a minor, coaching Alex on what to say. These actions are deeply concerning. It is a blatant disregard for Alex's emotional well-being and raises significant questions about the fitness of both Linda and Logan as parents. There was a slight murmur in the courtroom as the judge's words landed. I could see Linda and Logan shift uncomfortably in their seats. Their lawyer's face tightened with anxiety, clearly sensing the shift in the proceedings. The judge turned his attention back to me. Mr. Thompson, it is clear that you have been a loving and devoted father to Alex. His well-being, as well as his wishes, have been at the forefront of this case. After reviewing all the evidence, the testimony provided, and considering the actions of the other parties involved, I find that full custody of Alex should be awarded to you. My heart leapt in my chest, and I couldn't suppress the tears that welled up in my eyes. I looked at Alex, who was sitting beside me, and saw the look of relief and happiness on his face. It was as if a weight had been lifted from both of us. The judge paused for a moment, allowing the weight of his decision to settle. The bond between a parent and child is not solely defined by biology. It is defined by years of love, care, and commitment. And it is clear to me that you, Mr. Thompson, have been the father that Alex needed. You have been present in his life, and that bond is irreplaceable. Linda's face contorted with shock, and Logan's jaw clenched. Their lawyer was frantically flipping through his notes, clearly trying to figure out how to respond to such a decisive ruling. The judge's gaze hardened as he concluded, "I am granting you full custody of Alex. Furthermore, based on the efforts to manipulate the case and the testimony, I am ordering that the legal fees be borne by Ms. Linda and Mr. Logan. It is a direct result of their actions." The room fell silent as the judge's gavel came down with a sharp crack, signaling the end of the proceedings. I stood up, barely able to contain my emotions, and Alex immediately ran to me, throwing his arms around me in a tight embrace. "Dad, we did it," Alex whispered, his voice thick with relief. I held him close, tears streaming down my face. "We did, buddy. We did." It felt like a dream, like the end of a long, painful journey. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I finally believed that we could move forward, together. As for the divorce, it was finalized, and I had no desire to remain married to Linda after everything that had unfolded. Additionally, the judge ordered Linda and Logan to pay my legal fees due to their attempts to manipulate the case. When the judge announced his decision, I was overwhelmed with relief and joy. Alex ran to me and hugged me tightly, and I couldn't hold back my tears. It felt like an enormous weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in months, I felt like I could truly breathe again. In the weeks since, Alex and I have been adjusting to our new normal. We're back in our old house, working hard to rebuild our life together. It's been challenging financially, but we're making it work, one day at a time. I've had to scale back on some expenses, but Alex understands. He even offered to get a part-time job to help out, but I told him to focus on school and just being a kid. Alex has been incredible throughout all of this. He's in therapy to help him process everything that's happened, and I'm so proud of how mature and strong he's been. We've had some deep conversations about family, trust, and what it truly means to be a father. It hasn't always been easy, but I feel like we're both growing from this experience. Linda and Logan have visitation rights, but Alex has made it clear that he doesn't want to see them right now. I'm letting him take the lead on that. I don't want to push him into any situation he's not comfortable with. The therapist suggested we take it slow and perhaps start with supervised visits when Alex feels ready. As for me, I'm also in therapy, working through the betrayal and stress of the past few months. It's not easy, but I'm taking it one day at a time. I'm learning to trust again and to believe that good things can still happen, even when it feels like everything is falling apart. I've made some adjustments at work too. I explained the situation to my bosses, and they've been understanding. I've cut back on some hours so I can be home more for Alex. It means tighter finances, but being there for him is worth it. Slowly, we're finding our new rhythm. Alex and I now cook dinner together most nights. We're both pretty bad at it, but we're learning and laughing a lot along the way. We've also started having a weekly movie night, working our way through all the classic films I loved as a kid. I want to thank everyone who offered support and advice on my original post. There were moments when your kind words were the only thing keeping me going. To anyone else going through something similar, don't give up. The truth has a way of coming out. Alex and I are looking forward to the future. We're planning a camping trip for this summer, just the two of us, like old times. We're both excited about it. It'll be a chance to reconnect and create new memories. I know there will still be challenges ahead, tough days when the hurt and anger resurface, but I also know that Alex and I can face anything together. No matter what happens, we'll always have each other. A few months after everything settled down, I started feeling like I was ready to open myself up to the idea of love again. It wasn't easy. For a long time, I couldn't imagine trusting someone the way I had trusted Linda. But as time passed and I focused on rebuilding my life with Alex, I realized that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life alone. I wanted someone to share it with, someone who could be a part of our new family. It wasn't until I met Julia that I felt something spark inside me again. She was kind, patient, and understood what I had been through. We met through a mutual friend, and at first, I didn't expect much. But as we spent more time together, I began to see her for who she truly was, strong, compassionate, and real. She didn't try to fix me or make me forget the past. She accepted it, and in her presence, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't experienced in a long time. Alex took to her right away. She was warm and gentle with him, never pushing him to do anything he wasn't ready for. At first, they kept their distance, but over time, Julia earned Alex's trust. She made an effort to get to know him, and it didn't take long before they were laughing together, sharing stories, and even starting to enjoy their own little routines. When I proposed to Julia, it felt different from the first time around. It wasn't about filling a void or trying to make up for the past. It was about building something new, something solid, with someone who truly understood me. She said yes, and we began planning a quiet wedding, just the three of us, surrounded by the people who cared for us. The day we got married, Alex stood beside me as my best man. He was so happy for us, so proud to see his father starting a new chapter with someone who would love both of us. Julia and Alex had become a team, and I could see the way they supported each other, just like I always dreamed a family should. The transition wasn't without its challenges, of course. Alex had moments when he missed the way things used to be, but Julia was patient, always giving him the space he needed while showing him that he didn't have to choose between his past and his future. Over time, it became clear that Alex was thriving in this new family dynamic. He had a new mother who loved him as her own, and I had a partner who made me feel complete. As we grew together, I saw Alex blossom in ways I hadn't expected. His confidence grew, and he began to embrace the love and support Julia gave him. They bonded over shared interests, like hiking and playing soccer in the yard, and I could see the way Alex began to look at her, not as a replacement, but as a new source of love and stability in his life. We're a family now, and although the past will always be part of our story, I know that Alex and I are stronger than ever. We've built something beautiful with Julia, and every day I'm grateful for the life we're creating together. There are challenges ahead, but as long as we have each other, I know we can face them. Alex is happy, thriving, and surrounded by love, and so am I. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Looking back, I never imagined my life would turn into some twisted drama like this. For the longest time, I thought Kate and I were a typical happy couple. We had our ups and downs like anyone else, but we made it work, or at least it's what I told myself. We just moved into this new neighborhood, a fresh start, I thought. A place where we could make new memories, get to know the neighbors, and live our so-called peaceful life. And things started well enough. We quickly clicked with Mike and Laura, who lived next door. Mike, I'll give it to him, had that type of confidence that pulls people in. A successful businessman, smooth talker, always seemed like he knew what he was doing. Laura was the opposite, quiet, reserved, but sweet. I used to joke that they balanced each other out perfectly. Little did I know, that perfect balance was just a goddamn illusion. At first, everything felt normal, better than normal even. Kate seemed happier. We'd spend our weekends exploring new spots in town, trying different restaurants, going for hikes. But like all those picture-perfect things, the cracks started to show. And they didn't just show, they split wide open, and I couldn't unsee them once I caught a glimpse. The first sign that something was off with Kate came out of nowhere. She started spending a lot more time meeting with friends, which she'd never done much before. It's not that I didn't want her to have her own life. I'm not that guy. But when the girls' nights turned into staying out until God knows when, it was different. There were excuses, too. Staying late at work, traffic was terrible, lost track of time. Always something. Then there was the phone thing. The damn phone. She kept it on silent like 24/7. Kate used to leave her phone lying around, charging somewhere, not really caring about it. Now it was glued to her hand or hidden away in her bag. I get it, privacy is one thing, but it was more like she had something to hide. And then she'd get these texts, right? Her face would light up, and she'd laugh a little, type something back quickly, and the smile would disappear the moment she saw me looking. She got good at hiding it, too. At first, I thought I was just being paranoid. You know that gut feeling that nags at you, but you try to shut it down because you don't want to seem like some jealous asshole? That was me for months. Her attitude changed, too. Kate had always been the one to initiate date nights, cuddle up on the couch, make plans. But suddenly, it felt like she could barely stand to be in the same room with me. Our conversations turned cold, distant, and it wasn't just the usual marital stuff. It was like she was there, but she wasn't. I started to feel like a ghost in my own house, walking around her while she pretended I didn't exist. I tried to push it all down, tell myself it was just a phase, work stress, anything. But every time I did, something else would happen to throw it back in my face. One night, she came home reeking of a cologne that wasn't mine. And sure, maybe she brushed past someone in a bar or hugged a friend, but it was strong, too strong to be an accidental brush off. And that's when I knew something was seriously wrong. I'm not proud of it, but I started doing things I never thought I'd do. I started keeping an eye on her, checking when she'd leave, when she'd come back. I'd look at her calendar, see if her late work nights lined up. And they did at first, until one day they didn't. That's when I caught her meeting with Mike. Yeah, good ol' friendly neighbor Mike. Mr. Charisma himself. I followed her that day, which felt insane, like I was going crazy becoming that guy. But I couldn't help it. She'd been acting too weird, and my head was spinning with all the possibilities. So there I was, trying to keep my distance, feeling like some kind of amateur detective, and there they were, sitting together at a cafe just a few blocks from our neighborhood. And it wasn't a work meeting or a friendly chat. The way they leaned in close, the way she laughed at his jokes, it was like watching her on a date. Her smile, her eyes, all the little things that used to be for me, now aimed right at Mike. I remember feeling this pit in my stomach like the ground was falling out from under me. I snapped a picture right then. A part of me thought, maybe you're jumping to conclusions, but deep down I knew. I just knew. That was the first time I felt that raw, unmistakable feeling of betrayal. But it wouldn't be the last. No, this was just the beginning of a nightmare that would unravel everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, and who Kate really was. I couldn't confront her. Not yet. I needed to know more, needed to be sure. And I couldn't talk to Laura either. I mean, what do you say? Hey, just a heads up, I think your husband is banging my wife. No, I had to keep quiet, at least for a little while longer. The truth is, keeping all that rage bottled up was killing me. Everywhere I went, I saw Kate and Mike in my head, laughing, talking, touching. Every time I looked at her, I felt sick. Every time I saw him, I wanted to punch that smug smile off his face. But I kept my cool, at least on the outside. On the inside, I was a mess, a tornado of anger, confusion, and, yeah, a little bit of fear. Fear of what came next. Fear of how this would change everything. One afternoon, while I was pacing around the neighborhood trying to clear my head, I bumped into Laura. She was out walking her dog, and for a second I considered just nodding and moving on. I mean, what was I supposed to say to her? How could I even look her in the eye, knowing that her husband was screwing my wife? But she called out to me, and there was no backing out of it. So I played along, made small talk, asked how she was doing. I remember watching her as she talked. She had this gentle way about her, a bit shy, a bit quiet. But I could tell there was something beneath that soft exterior, something sharper, more perceptive. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks, but I could swear I saw the sadness in her eyes, like she was carrying a weight of her own. And that's when it hit me, maybe she knew. Maybe she had her own suspicions. Or maybe she was just like me, trying to make sense of a life that was slowly spiraling out of control. So I tested the waters. I brought up relationships, just casually, like I was making small talk. Asked how she and Mike were doing, mentioned how busy Kate had been with work. And that's when she let her guard down. She sighed, gave this tired smile, and said that things had been distant between her and Mike. He'd been more preoccupied lately, working late, distracted. Sound familiar? Yeah, it sounded like a damn echo of my own marriage. But what really hit me was how she said it, like she was used to it, like she'd convinced herself that it was normal. She kept talking about how she trusted Mike, how they'd been through rough patches before, but he'd always been loyal in the end. I wanted to scream, to shake her, and tell her to wake up, but I held back. I couldn't just drop it on her, at least not yet. But the more she talked, the more I realized that she had no clue. She was living in the same lie I'd been living in, trying to rationalize all the warning signs. And I hated it. I hated seeing that look of hope in her eyes, knowing that it was built on nothing but lies. So I decided to do what had to be done. I couldn't let her live in the dark, not when I knew the truth. Laura, I finally said, and she must have noticed the change in my voice because she stopped mid-sentence and looked at me. There's something I need to tell you. It's about Mike and Kate. She looked confused at first, then wary. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I took a deep breath. I couldn't hold it in anymore. They're having an affair. And there it was. The words hung in the air like poison, and for a moment I thought she was going to faint. She blinked, shook her head, like she was trying to clear it, like she was refusing to believe what I'd just said. That's not possible, she stammered, forcing a laugh that sounded more like a sob. You must be mistaken. Mike, he wouldn't. Laura, I interrupted. I wish I was wrong. I really do. But I'm not. I've seen them. I followed Kate one day, and she met up with Mike. They were together, and it wasn't just some friendly meeting. It was intimate. She still didn't believe me. She was shaking her head, looking at me like I was crazy, like I was making it all up. So, I did what I had to do. I pulled out my phone and showed her the picture I'd taken at the cafe. The way Kate leaned into Mike, the way he touched her arm, it was all there, clear as day. And when Laura saw it, I saw the moment it all clicked. The moment her whole world shattered. She grabbed the phone from my hand, staring at the photo like she was trying to burn a hole through it. Her breathing got heavier, her eyes filled with tears, and then the rage came. She tossed the phone back to me, muttering, "That son of a bitch." We sat on a bench after that, neither of us saying much. What could we say? Everything we thought we knew about our lives, our marriages, had been torn apart in an instant. And as much as I hated Mike and Kate, my heart broke for Laura. She didn't deserve this. Neither of us did. But when the tears stopped, when the shock wore off, something else took its place. Anger. Pure, unfiltered anger. Laura clenched her fists, staring off into the distance, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. They think they can just get away with this? She muttered. They think we're just going to sit back and let them do this to us? I shook my head. Not a chance, I said. They're not going to get away with it. We're going to make them pay. And that's when we came up with the plan to give Mike and Kate a taste of their own medicine. I know it sounds crazy, but we were both running on pure emotion at that point. Revenge was the only thing that made sense, the only thing that felt right. And the idea was simple. Make sure they catch us together. Make sure they walk in on us in a moment they can never forget. Let's set a trap, Laura said, her voice low and fierce. Let's make sure they see it, every second of it. Let them know what it feels like. I nodded, feeling that same rage, that same thirst for vengeance. I knew this wasn't just about payback. It was about taking back control, about not letting them think they could destroy our lives and walk away unscathed. And hell, maybe it was also about feeling something, anything other than the pain they'd caused. Laura and I started plotting. We found a night when we knew Mike and Kate would be out, probably sneaking around like they usually did. We made sure they'd come home at just the right time, and when they did, they'd find us together. We were going to make sure they saw everything, that they understood just how badly they'd screwed up. I don't know if what we did was right. Honestly, I don't even care. All I know is that at that moment, it felt like the only way to reclaim a little bit of what they'd stolen from us. And we were ready to do whatever it took to make them pay. I'll tell you, planning revenge is a hell of a lot easier than living it. When Laura and I sat there, plotting how to tear down their little love affair, it all seemed so clear. Get together, make sure they see us, let them feel the burn. Simple. But the closer we got to that night, the more I realized how complicated it all was, how much pain we were both carrying around. But we were committed, no turning back. We picked the date carefully. A Friday night when we knew they'd be out, probably pretending to be somewhere respectable while sneaking around behind our backs. We guessed they'd use the same excuse they always did, and we were right. Kate told me she had to work late again, big project or some crap, and I pretended to buy it, gave her that fake supportive smile she probably thought I still believed in. Laura said Mike had some networking dinner, and when he left the house that evening, I knew they were together. Just like we'd planned, Laura came over to my place, and the tension in the air was thick. We both knew what was coming, what we had to do, but that didn't make it any easier. There was this unspoken weight between us, a mix of nervousness, anger, and sadness. And I remember Laura standing in the doorway, just staring at me for a second, like she was trying to find the right words but couldn't. I didn't know what to say either, so I just invited her in, poured us both a drink, and we sat in silence for a few minutes, letting it all settle in. Eventually we started talking, not about the plan, but about everything else, our lives, our marriages, our feelings. Laura opened up in a way I'd never seen before. She talked about how she felt like a ghost in her own home, like she was invisible to Mike, how every time he touched her, it felt forced, like he was going through the motions. I told her about how Kate's smile had gone cold, how she used to look at me like I was the only man in the world, but now I was just there, just a piece of furniture. It's hard to describe, but sharing that pain with someone who truly understood felt like peeling back this layer of numbness I didn't even realize I had. And that closeness, it wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about finding comfort in someone who'd been hurt just as deeply. Before I knew it, we were holding each other, holding on like we'd fall apart if we let go. And maybe we would have. The kiss happened naturally, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. 1 second we were talking, the next our lips were on each other, and for a brief moment, all the anger, all the betrayal, melted away. It was just the two of us trying to forget, trying to feel alive again. I'm not going to pretend it was some romantic, perfect moment. It was messy, it was raw, but it was real, and it was what we both needed right then. One thing led to another, and we ended up in my bed, bodies tangled together in a way that felt both desperate and freeing. I didn't care about Mike, about Kate, about the consequences. All that mattered was that Laura and I were in this together, that we could lose ourselves in each other and forget, just for a little while, the mess our lives had become. The sex wasn't gentle, it wasn't sweet. It was driven by this mix of rage, lust, and an unspoken understanding that we were both broken, and maybe this was our way of trying to put the pieces back together. We didn't know exactly when they'd be back, but we made sure we were ready. The plan was to give them the show of their lives, make sure they saw every second of what we were doing. And when I heard the front door open, when I heard their voices, Mike laughing about something, Kate chiming in with that familiar flirty giggle, I felt my heart pounding out of my chest. Laura must have felt it too because she squeezed my hand, giving me that look that said, "Let's do this." The next few moments were like a slow-motion train wreck, one I couldn't tear my eyes away from. They walked in, right into the living room, and then we were tangled up in each other right on the couch. Laura's back was to them, but I could see their faces, the shock, the horror, the rage. Mike's eyes went wide, and he stood there frozen for a second, like his brain couldn't process what he was seeing. Kate! Oh, Kate. Her face twisted into this mix of fury and disgust, like she couldn't believe I'd stooped to this, like I was the one who'd betrayed her. And then all hell broke loose. Mike charged at me, shouting something I couldn't even understand. I barely had time to roll off the couch before he was on me, throwing a wild punch that missed my face by inches. I got up, pushed him back, and we were standing there, fists up, ready to tear into each other. "Are you out of your goddamn mind, Alex?" Mike screamed, his voice cracking like he couldn't believe what was happening. Am I out of my mind? I shot back. "How long have you been screwing my wife, Mike? How long?" Kate started yelling, too, her voice high and shrill. "How could you do this to me, Alex? After everything we've been through, everything we've been through?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean like all those late nights with Mike? How could I do this? How about you explain yourself for once?" Laura, still sitting there, wrapped herself in a blanket, staring daggers at Mike. "I guess now you know how it feels," she said coldly, her voice steady despite the chaos around us. The shouting match went on for what felt like forever. Accusations, curses, insults flying back and forth. Mike and Kate tried to make it about us, tried to paint Laura and me as the villains, but we stood our ground. We laid it all out, every lie, every secret. And in that moment, I saw the realization hit them. I saw it in their eyes, the guilt, the shame. They had no defense, no excuse, because the truth was laid bare for all of us to see. Mike lunged at me one last time, and I shoved him back hard enough that he stumbled and fell, taking a lamp down with him. Kate screamed and ran to his side, like I'd just heard her precious lover, and that's when I knew I was done. Done with the lies, the cheating, the bullshit excuses. Let them have each other. They deserved whatever came next. Laura and I walked out of that house together, leaving Mike and Kate behind, tangled up in their own mess. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel like the world was crashing down around me. I felt free. And yeah, it was messy, it was chaotic, but it was real. And I knew that whatever came next, I'd be ready for it. The dust didn't settle after that night. It only got thicker, suffocating everything in its path. You think confronting the truth would make things better, like ripping off a Band-Aid, letting the wound finally heal. But that was just the beginning, the start of a war that burned down everything around us. The next morning, I woke up in my own house, my bed feeling emptier than ever. Kate hadn't come home, and honestly, I didn't expect her to. I figured she was either with Mike or hiding out somewhere, trying to wrap her head around everything. I could only imagine the conversation they were having, how they were trying to spin this whole thing as my fault, as Laura's fault. But I didn't care. Let them twist the story however they wanted. It didn't change what they did. Around midday, the storm finally hit. Kate showed up, bursting through the door like a bat out of hell, face red and eyes wild. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she screamed, her voice cracking like she was already on the verge of tears. "How could you do this to us?" To me? I sat there on the couch, my face blank, letting her words bounce off me like nothing. I was done being the guy who took the blame, the guy who bent over backward to make her happy. I let her shout, let her rant, let all her fury spill out, until she finally stopped, breathing hard, waiting for me to respond. "You done?" I asked, my voice cold, detached. It seemed to throw her off because she just stood there, mouth open, not knowing what to say. I got up slowly, walked over to her, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I looked her right in the eye, no fear, no hesitation. "You want to talk about betrayal, Kate? About ruining what we had? You have the nerve to come in here, after everything, and play the victim? Do you even hear yourself? You slept with Laura," she shouted back like that was her winning argument, like that was going to change everything. "You're no better than me." I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that cut through the silence. "Yeah, I did. And you know why? Because you did it first. Because I was sick and tired of living in this lie, tired of pretending we were still something we weren't. I paid you back, Kate. And let's be real. You had it coming." Her face twisted in anger, but there was a flash of something else there, too. Shame. Guilt. I saw it clear as day, and it felt satisfying. For the first time, I didn't care about her tears or her broken voice. I didn't care that she was hurt. All I cared about was making her own up to what she'd done, to see her finally face the truth. "It wasn't like that," she said weakly, and I could tell she was struggling to keep up the act. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, Alex. I was confused. I was lonely. You don't understand." "I don't understand?" I interrupted, stepping closer, feeling the anger bubbling up in my chest. "You're right, Kate, I don't understand. I don't understand how you could do this to me, to our marriage. I don't understand how you could look me in the eyes every damn day and lie, over and over again. And don't even start with the excuses. You were lonely? Well, guess what? I was lonely too. But I didn't go screwing around with the neighbor. That was all you." She crumbled then, her defenses cracking as the tears started flowing. "I'm sorry," she sobbed, her hands shaking as she reached out to touch me. "I'm so sorry, Alex. I never meant to hurt you. Please, we can fix this. We could try again, I swear." "Stop," I said, pulling away from her touch like it burned. "There's no fixing this, Kate. No trying again. I'm done. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it. We both do." And that was it. I walked out of the room, left her standing there in her own mess of tears and regrets. And for once, I didn't look back. There was nothing left to save, nothing left to fight for. I was done pretending. Over the next few days, everything blew up. The neighbors caught wind of the whole mess. How could they not, with all the shouting and slamming doors? And suddenly, our once friendly little block turned into a battlefield. Mike tried to confront me a couple of times, but I shut him down quick. He'd come over, all high and mighty, trying to make me the villain, but I wasn't having it. Go fix your own marriage, Mike, I told him. Or don't. I don't give a shit. But stay the hell out of my face. Laura wasn't having any of it either. I remember seeing her and Mike screaming at each other in their driveway one night, and it hit me just how far we'd all fallen. What was once this picture-perfect image of two couples, happy and in love, was now a war zone. And the lines were drawn clear. There was no going back. Laura filed for divorce the very next week, and I knew I had to do the same. The whole process felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. Meetings with lawyers dividing assets, arguing over who gets what, none of it felt real. But it was real, and I had to face it. Kate, of course, tried to make it all about saving what we had. She'd call, text, show up unannounced, begging for one more chance, saying we could go to counseling, start fresh, all that bullshit. I'd never seen her so desperate, so pathetic. I don't know what she was more afraid of, losing me or losing the life we'd built. But either way, it didn't matter. My mind was made up. Why, Alex? She cried one day, standing in our kitchen, clutching a half-empty bottle of wine like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Why can't we just try? I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, but we can make it better. Please. I love you. I looked at her, really looked at her, and all I saw was a stranger. A stranger who'd lied, cheated, destroyed everything we'd once had. I don't love you anymore, Kate, I said, my voice steady, final. And you don't love me. Maybe you did once, maybe I did too, but not anymore. And I'm not going to spend the rest of my life pretending like that's enough. She broke down then, collapsing onto the floor, sobbing like her world was ending. And maybe it was, but I didn't comfort her. I didn't hold her or tell her it was going to be okay. I let her cry, let her feel every ounce of the pain she'd caused. I wasn't going to be her savior anymore. She didn't deserve it. So that was that. The end of our marriage. The end of the lies. And while it felt like a million knives were stabbing into my chest, I knew it was the right thing to do. I couldn't keep living in that nightmare, couldn't keep pretending we could go back to what we once were. Mike and Kate could have each other. They deserved each other, two lying, cheating snakes wrapped up in their own toxic mess. And me? I was ready to burn it all down, walk away, and start over, ready to take back my life, one step at a time. Filing for divorce wasn't a relief. It felt like jumping headfirst into a storm I knew would wreck whatever was left of my old life. And if you think ending a marriage is just about signing some papers and calling it quits, think again. It's a long, messy, and brutal battle. And with Kate, it felt like a war that dragged on forever. I remember that first meeting with the lawyer, sitting across from a guy who seemed way too calm for what I was about to put on his plate. I laid it all out there, sparing none of the gritty details. The cheating, the lies, the confrontation. It was like ripping open an old wound, letting it bleed out in the middle of some sterile office. And my lawyer just nodded, scribbling notes, already figuring out how to strategize the best way to split our life down the middle. The process itself was hell. Kate was relentless, and any hope I had for a clean break evaporated the second she got her own lawyer involved. Suddenly, it was all about money, property, and who got what. She wanted the house, of course she did. She wanted alimony, claiming she needed support because her career wasn't as stable as mine. I was stunned by the audacity. Here was this woman, who'd spent God knows how long screwing around behind my back, and now she expected me to pay for her to move on? Not on my watch. We fought over everything. The car, the furniture, even the damn coffee maker. Every time we met, every email from her lawyer, it was like a dagger aimed right at me. And don't get me wrong, I wasn't going to let her walk away with whatever she wanted just to avoid a fight. I was done rolling over for her, done letting her dictate how this was going to end. I fought back. I made sure my lawyer knew exactly what we were dealing with and that we'd push for a fair division of our stuff. Nothing more, nothing less. The arguments were endless, and they bled into every aspect of my life. Work, sleep, even when I was out trying to distract myself with friends or hobbies, it all came back to this one painful process. Every time I thought we were close to a resolution, Kate would pull some stunt, try to drag it out just a little bit longer. Maybe she was still hoping I'd cave, that I'd throw my hands up and give her whatever she wanted. But I wasn't that guy anymore. During all of this, I didn't hear much from Mike. Not directly, at least. Laura and I had agreed early on not to keep dragging each other back into the mess, to let each other fight our own battles. After that one explosive night, we both realized that whatever we shared, whatever we'd done, wasn't something we could carry forward. It was a moment, a burning flare of revenge and raw emotion, but it wasn't real. We didn't regret it, but we knew it wasn't the start of anything new. Just two people trying to find some comfort in each other's shattered lives. And that was okay. Laura and I stayed in touch, supporting each other as we both trudged through our divorces. But it was different now. Platonic, more like two survivors helping each other out of the wreckage. And I think that's what we both needed. A friend who understood, without all the complications of whatever relationship we might have had. There was no drama, no expectations, just an understanding that we'd both been through the fire, and we were still standing. It was around this time that I started to claw my way back to something that felt like a life of my own. It wasn't easy. Hell, I didn't even know where to start. For months, my whole world had revolved around Kate, around our marriage, and then around the mess of unraveling it all. But now it was just me, just Alex. And it was time to figure out what that actually meant. I hit the gym hard. I'd always worked out here and there, but this time it was different. It wasn't about getting in shape or looking good. It was about having a place to pour all that anger, all that pain, and sweat it out until I couldn't feel anything but exhaustion. And in a weird way, it worked. Each session was like chiseling away at the old broken parts of myself, rebuilding piece by piece. There were days I didn't want to go, days where I just wanted to lie in bed and let the world pass me by. But every time I got up and pushed through, I felt a little stronger. Outside the gym, I started picking up old hobbies, things I'd let fall to the side over the years. I dusted off my guitar, started jamming again, letting the music drown out all the noise in my head. I went out hiking, fishing, just getting away from everything that reminded me of my old life. I even reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with, guys I hadn't seen in years because I'd been too wrapped up in my marriage. And damn, it felt good. It felt good to laugh, to drink, to just be myself without constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering what Kate was doing, where she was, or who she was with. Every day was a little easier than the last. I started sleeping better, waking up without that heavy feeling in my chest. And sure, there were moments where I'd be hit with a wave of memories, a flash of what we used to have, and it'd hurt. But I was learning to let those moments pass, to not hold on to them so tightly. Because holding on to the past was like holding on to broken glass. Nothing but pain and blood. The divorce process still dragged on, of course, but it became more like background noise. Kate and I were barely speaking, only communicating through lawyers, and that was fine by me. Every day that went by, I felt the grip of that old life loosen, and I could see a new horizon forming in the distance. A horizon that didn't have her in it. It's funny how you go through something like this, and it changes you, not just in the ways you expect, but in ways you never saw coming. I didn't come out of this with a new love or some fairy tale ending, but I came out of it stronger, clearer on what I wanted, on who I was. And that felt like more than enough. For once, I wasn't trying to fix someone else's life. I wasn't trying to make a broken marriage work. I was just living one day at a time, one step at a time, moving forward. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. Like the weight had finally been lifted. Like I was finally free. The day my divorce was finalized wasn't some big celebration. It was just a quiet end to a brutal chapter. Once it was over, I felt a weight lift, like the storm had finally passed. Kate and I were done. The ties cut. And the anger I'd carried around started to fade. I forgave her, not because she deserved it, but because I needed to let go and move on. Life after divorce was about rediscovery. I had to relearn how to live for myself, to rebuild my routine, and to find joy in things that had nothing to do with us. I hit the gym hard, picking up running, boxing, and even hiking, anything that made me feel alive again. Reconnecting with old friends, jamming on my guitar, just enjoying the simple things. Each step brought me back to who I was, or maybe who I was meant to be. Laura and I didn't pursue anything more than friendship after our night together. It was a moment we needed, but it didn't define our future. We supported each other through the divorce process, sharing our struggles, but keeping things platonic. I appreciated that. We both needed a clean slate. I dated a bit, went out more, and started meeting new people, not rushing into anything, but just living. And yeah, Kate's memory would pop up now and then, but the sting had dulled. Instead of holding on to the past, I learned to let it go, finding comfort in my own company and the life I was building. Every struggle, every sleepless night had shaped me into someone stronger, happier. And when I looked in the mirror, I finally recognized the person staring back. It wasn't about forgetting what happened. It was about moving forward and finding peace in who I am now. And that was enough.
Husband falsely accused of cheating gets epic revenge after catching wife flirting at a party. Hey, who's that handsome guy? Both Cindy's husband, Jim, and their friend Barbara were taken aback by her question even before they stepped through the backyard gate. Barbara followed Cindy's gaze and spotted a friend of Adam, Cindy's brother-in-law. Just so you know, I'm right here, Jim reminded his wife. What? Can't I admire a good-looking guy when I see one? She retorted. Well, if you're going to check out some guy, I'd prefer if you kept it to yourself. Jim responded a bit bluntly before shifting his focus to their host. Hi, Barb, sorry about that. Barbara and her husband Tony were hosting an outdoor birthday party for their daughter, who had just turned 13. Barbara saw them approaching, but hadn't greeted them yet. She chose to overlook Cindy's question. No worries, you two. Come on in, she said, still holding the gate. Where should these go? Jim asked, holding up a case of beer. There are a few coolers by the tree filled with ice, Jim. Some have soft drinks for the kids, but the others are for the beer. Just pick an empty one. Gifts go on that table over there, she directed Cindy, who was carrying a nicely wrapped box. Tony, the CO host, spotted them and came over to welcome them. Hey, welcome you two, he said, kissing Cindy on the cheek. Jimbo, let me take that, as he reached for the case. Cindy made another attempt. Hey, Tony, who's the handsome guy sitting over there with your brother? Tony, a bit slow to catch on and unaware of the previous conversation, looked where she had gestured. Oh, his name's Bob something. He works construction with Adam. Why, do you know him? No, but I wouldn't mind, she replied. I mean, what a hunk. Tony glanced at Jim, surprised and not fully understanding the situation. He tried to lighten the mood. Watch out, Jim. Sounds like she's on the prowl, he joked. Jim was just as surprised. It seemed like his wife was trying to make him jealous for some reason, but he didn't want to ruin the party. So he chuckled it off and forced a smile. Yeah, sounds like she's ready to trade me in for a younger guy. That'll be the day, Barbara quipped, giving Jim's arm a playful slap. Well, come on in, you guys, Tony said. Barb, why don't you show Cindy where to put the gifts? When Barbara saw the expression on her husband's face, she understood exactly what he was implying. He hoped she would inquire about Cindy's behavior. En route to the gift table, she lowered her voice to ensure no one else could overhear. Okay, Cin, what's happening? Did you and Jim have an argument or something? What do you mean? Don't give me that. We've all been friends for a long time, and I've never heard you speak like that in front of Jim. Something's up. I'm just giving him a taste of his own medicine. He's out all day flirting with every pretty girl he sees. You know Linda Kingston? Yeah. She saw Jim in a restaurant a few days ago. He obviously didn't notice her. She told me the waitress came over and kissed him. They talked and laughed through lunch, flirting the whole time. Cindy, Jim's a friendly, outgoing guy. That's just his personality. Having a girl kiss you is more than being friendly, Barb. It's crossing a line, and you know it. Tony kissed you on the cheek a minute ago. That's different. We've been friends for years. This is some waitress he flirts with when he goes there. I don't like it, and it definitely doesn't pass the wife test. The wife test? Yeah, you know, guys use it all the time, but for them, it's the husband test. A wife shouldn't do anything in public or private that she wouldn't do in front of her husband. Well, what's good for the goose, as they say. So, you chose my daughter's birthday party to give Jim a hard time? Don't worry, I won't do anything drastic. I wasn't even thinking about it until I saw Adam's friend over there. He's perfect. I just want to teach Jim a lesson. Well, do me a favor and don't start any fights, okay? I won't. Besides, look at that guy, he's built like a tank. Jim would be crazy to mess with him. All right. I see more guests coming up the walk, so I have to go do my meet and greet thing. I'll catch up with you later. Remember, no fights, okay? No fights, Barb, I promise. She glanced around and spotted Jennifer, the guest of honor, chatting with her friends. She decided to go over and wish her a happy birthday. Jim had just finished helping Tony with the beer and had the same idea. They both arrived at the same time. Cindy spoke first. Congrats, honey. You're officially a teenager. You can really give your parents a hard time now, she joked. That goes for me too, Jen, Jim added. The congrats part, I mean. I'm not sure about the giving your folks a hard time part, he teased. Jennifer laughed at Jim's joke. It was well known in their circle that she'd had a crush on him since she was a toddler. Thanks, she replied, while giving Cindy a hug and Jim a kiss on the cheek. These are my friends, Coral, Kathy, and Debbie, she introduced. They chatted with Jen and her friends briefly, but Cindy was eager to proceed with her plan to teach Jim a lesson. Hey, sweetie, she addressed the birthday girl. I'm going to go say hi to your uncle. Catch you later. Jim was about to accompany her when he noticed Tony signaling to him. As Cindy began to walk away, he remarked, Behave yourself. She shot him a wicked glance. Approaching Tony, who was still by the coolers, Jim inquired, What's up, buddy? Just wanted to give you a heads up. Barb talked to Cindy. Seems like you've been flirting with some waitress. Cindy caught wind of it and has this idea to teach you a lesson. I'm guessing that's what all this hunk talk is about. Jim pondered for a moment. I have no idea what she's talking about. I haven't flirted with any waitress that I'm aware of. Did she mention where or who supposedly saw me? I'm not sure, she didn't specify, but I think she's planning to use Bob to make you jealous, so try to stay cool, okay? Meanwhile, as Tony and Jim conversed, Cindy approached her target. Hi, Adam. Hey, Cindy, how's it going? All right, I guess. Who's your handsome friend? Adam was taken aback while his friend stood and introduced himself. Hi, I'm Bob. I assume you were talking about me, right? He said with a charming grin. Who else? She replied. Hey, Cindy, Adam interjected. Where's Jim? He's over there chatting with your brother. I'd love one of those, she said, pointing to the beer Bob held. Hey, Adam, why don't you be a gentleman and grab the lady a beer while we get to know each other better? Not wanting to be rude, Adam obliged. As soon as he headed for the coolers, Bob offered Cindy his now vacant seat. As she sat down, she glanced over to see her husband glaring at her. Seeing his reaction only fueled her confidence that her plan was working. She turned to engage in conversation with her new acquaintance. Meanwhile, when Adam reached the coolers, he approached Tony and Jim. Hey, what's up with Cindy? Why, what happened? Jim inquired. She's cozying up to Bob over there. Who's he anyway? Jim asked. He works with me. We're on that big high-rise downtown. I've known him about 6 months. Seems all right, but he's a bit of a ladies' man, and I wouldn't trust him around women. He didn't bring a date? Jim asked. Nah, it was sort of a last-minute thing. He was supposed to play golf today. We got off work last night around, and he got a text canceling. Started complaining about having nothing to do today, so I invited him to the party at least. Jim now understood what his wife was up to, though he wasn't sure how to handle it. He knew Cindy well. Once she got an idea in her head, she wouldn't let it go until she made her point. Ignoring her might push her further, but confronting her might provoke Bob. He aimed to avoid that scenario at all costs. Adam, do me a favor, will you? Just keep an eye on things. Let me know if it starts to get out of hand. Adam acknowledged Jim's instructions and grabbed a cold beer from the cooler before returning to where Bob and Cindy were engaged in conversation. Handing Cindy her beer and pulling up another chair, Adam felt it was time to interject. Hoping Bob would catch the hint, he mentioned having seen the pictures Jim took of the lumberyard fire and praised his talent, wondering if Jim planned to enter the press photographers contest again that year. Though slightly annoyed by the interruption, Cindy politely replied that she assumed Jim would participate. She then informed Bob that her husband worked as a photographer for the Tribune and had won several awards at a state contest for press photographers the previous year. Bob responded with a hint of disdain, acknowledging Jim's presence across the yard. Cindy confirmed it was indeed Jim, a response delivered with a dismissive tone that didn't go unnoticed by Bob or Adam. Bob shifted the conversation, expressing his enjoyment of working with his hands and constructing enduring structures. He then directed a question to Adam, asking for validation, to which Adam could only respond with agreement. Assuming Bob had effectively shut down the conversation about her husband, Cindy immediately resumed chatting with Bob, essentially excluding Adam from the discussion. He felt foolish. He'd heard Bob use that same line about working with his hands on women in bars before. It always seemed to impress them, And here Adam had unwittingly given Bob an opportunity. Feeling he was doing more damage than good, Adam excused himself to wish his niece a happy birthday for what felt like the 20th time. Jim circulated, mingling with the others while closely observing Cindy and her companion. Although none of the men mentioned his wife's interaction with another man, the women began to gossip. Jim overheard Jenny discussing the situation with her friends, mentioning that the man Cindy was with worked as a newspaper photographer. She added that her dad commented on how photographers often find themselves in various challenging situations due to their job. Jenny expressed surprise that Jim hadn't intervened physically. Jim chuckled to himself. It wasn't really Bob's fault after all, it was his wife's. And as frustrated as he sometimes felt, he'd never resort to violence against her or any other woman. Glancing over, he noticed an empty beer bottle next to Cindy's chair, and another in her hand already. She tended to drink more when she was nervous. This wasn't good. Bob had 3 empty bottles beside his chair. Just then, Tony mentioned that everyone seemed to be getting hungry. As he stood by the grill, Jim, preoccupied with Cindy, hadn't even noticed the enticing aroma of grilling meat. Tony then announced the food options available, including burgers, brats, and chicken patties, along with various sides on the nearby table for everyone to help themselves. Jim thought it might be a good opportunity to separate Bob from his wife. Perhaps they could find a quiet corner to eat, and he could learn more about this person he was supposedly flirting with. As he turned toward them, he saw the potential lovebirds setting their beers down beside their chairs and standing up. Apparently, Bob had decided that Cindy was his for the day and possessively took her by the elbow. Not happening, Jim muttered to himself. He quickly walked over. "Excuse me, could you remove your hand from my wife?" Bob immediately released Cindy's arm and raised both hands in a conciliatory gesture. "Sorry," he half-chuckled. We're just heading to get some food." "Yeah, well, I can handle it from here, thanks," Jim retorted angrily. He grasped Cindy's other elbow and led her over to the food table. "What's gotten into you?" Cindy questioned. That was incredibly rude. Ignoring his wife's remark, Jim guided her in front of him as they joined the food line. "Grab some food," he stated flatly. "You and I are going to have a talk over by the shed while we eat." Observing the confrontation between Jim and Bob, Adam seized the chance to speak to his colleague, now alone for the first time in a while. "What are you doing?" he asked, irritated. "She's married to one of my brother's closest friends. Leave her alone." "Hey man, you should be telling her to leave me alone. She's the one hitting on me. I'm just being polite." "Polite, my foot. Seriously, Bob, cut it out. Look, if you think you stand a chance with her, forget it. She's using you to get back at Jim over some waitress. Stay out of it. Listen, married or not, I've never turned down a beautiful woman like that in my life. I know women, and I think you're mistaken about her using me. She's genuinely interested, I can tell. I think you should leave. This is my niece's birthday party, and I don't want any trouble. All right, I'll back off. If she approaches me again, I'll send her right back to her husband, all right? If you don't, you're out of here, Bob. I mean it." "Scout's honor," he responded, holding up the Boy Scout salute. "Now, can I go get something to eat?" "Yeah, go ahead." Cindy wasn't particularly bothered by Jim stepping in between her and Bob. They had only known each other for a few hours, yet he was already becoming overly familiar, not to mention the suggestive comments he was making. Although it amused her to see how easily she could manipulate a man like that when she wanted to, still, she could sense from the way Jim had taken hold of her arm that she had pushed her husband as far as she should. She had promised Barbara no drama, and Jim had proven he wasn't intimidated by Bob's physique. She needed to spend the rest of the day with her husband. She just hoped he had learned his lesson. They both filled their plates with food, and Jim gestured toward the shed, away from the crowd. When they found a quiet spot, he handed Cindy his plate. "Here, hold this while I fetch a couple of chairs. I'll be right back." Despite his anger, Jim remained a gentleman, holding the back of her chair as Cindy sat down. He pulled his own chair alongside so they could talk privately. After a few bites, Jim couldn't contain himself any longer. As he was always direct, he questioned Cindy about the talk regarding him flirting with a waitress, expressing his dislike for such games. Cindy responded by saying she wasn't certain about the exact details, but that it supposedly occurred sometime last week. Jim remarked sarcastically about the vagueness of the information. Cindy then suggested that Jim might have a better understanding of the situation than she did, questioning if he flirts with every waitress. Surprised, Jim interjected, asking if he was told he kissed them. Cindy confirmed this, leading Jim to assert that there were only 2 possibilities. Either it was a mix-up or someone was feeding her lies, as he had only kissed Cindy since they started dating. Cindy gazed into his eyes. Though she usually felt she could gauge his honesty through his gaze, she wasn't entirely sure, as he had never lied to her as far as she knew. Why would someone claim they saw you kissing a waitress if it wasn't true? Beats me, he shrugged, taking another bite from his burger. Since she's your friend, ask her. How do you know it's a woman? It better be a woman. If a male friend told you he saw me kissing a waitress, then you've got your answer. Initially, Cindy entertained the thought that he might have seen her friend in the restaurant and kissed the waitress anyway, disregarding the potential consequences. But she wasn't sure what he meant by his last statement. What do you mean, if it's a man? I've answered my own question. Simple, if it is a man, he's into you and trying to stir up trouble between us. He's probably hoping to cozy up to you by playing the supportive friend. That's absurd. Is it? Think about it. Was it a man? No. All right, then we're back to square one. You'll have to ask your friend why she's misleading you. An uneasy silence followed as they both finished their lunches. When they were done, Jim had a few parting words. This is Jenny's birthday party, and I won't let it be spoiled by a fight with your friend. So if you keep cozying up to him like you have been, I'll just leave you here, and you can find your own way home. Or you can spend the night with Mr. Muscles, but then you won't have a home to come back to. Understand? She was taken aback by his intensity. Jim, calm down. I'm not going home with Bob. I wasn't even considering it. I was just trying to show you what it feels like to have your spouse flirting with someone else, that's all. Well, now you've shown me, so let's end it here. He stood, took his wife's paper plate and empty beer bottle, and walked over to dispose of them. As he turned back, he was relieved to see his wife right by his side. Bob, however, was displeased. He had been sneaking glances at the two of them talking while he sat alone eating his chicken patty. He had no doubt Cindy was genuinely interested. She was eager for action. However, he also acknowledged the need for discretion. Earlier, he had hoped for an opportunity to slip away with her, perhaps to an upstairs bedroom or his car, but now such plans were off the table. They were being watched. He'd have to postpone indulging his desires, at least for now. Despite their underlying tensions, Jim and Cindy were determined to enjoy the rest of the party. She stuck close to him for the remainder of the day, occasionally drifting off to chat with friends but always returning to his side. The only other interaction Cindy had with Bob was during the group rendition of Happy Birthday, when everyone gathered around Jenny's cake. Bob took advantage of the moment to sidle up beside her and discreetly touch her backside while everyone sang. Initially, she assumed it was Jim, but when she glanced over, she saw Bob wearing a smug grin on his face. She was stunned by his audacity. Glancing around quickly to check for any observers, she found everyone focused on Jenny. Normally, she would have reacted by slapping him, but she knew it would only stir up trouble, something she desperately wanted to avoid. Besides, she realized it was partly her own fault for encouraging him. If given the chance, she'd apologize to him and make it clear she wasn't interested. He withdrew his hand to join the applause as the birthday girl effortlessly blew out the candles. Jim glanced over when he heard Bob's voice nearby but saw nothing significant. Certainly, Cindy wasn't about to confess to Jim about Bob's inappropriate behavior during Happy Birthday. Naturally, Bob interpreted her silence as assent. He knew how to manipulate the situation. She had to stay close to her husband to avoid suspicion, but eventually, she would need to slip away to use the restroom indoors. Hopefully, he could catch her alone to arrange a meeting. He'd keep a discreet watch. For those aware of the earlier incident, the perceived threat seemed to have passed. Much to their relief, both Bob and Cindy seemed to be on their best behavior, so, with the possible exception of Jim, they all relaxed and let down their guard. Jim, however, had encountered guys like Bob before, men who thought they were irresistible to women and knew they were rarely dissuaded easily. Just to be cautious, he resolved to continue keeping an eye on the potential troublemaker. The party kicked into high gear after dinner. Tony turned up the outdoor speakers and played background music from Pandora while games were set up. A dartboard was placed on the large oak tree near the shed, and Jenny's friends helped her set up the beanbag toss. Some women gathered card tables for bingo. Jenny and her friends suggested a best-of-3 beanbag game to her parents. Jim and Cindy, Tony warned them about Jenny's skill. Fortunately, the adults won the first game, but the subsequent victories went to the youngsters. After the game, Cindy kissed Jim on the cheek and informed him that she needed to use the restroom and would return shortly. Jim replied that he might challenge Adam to a game of darts. Cindy stopped to chat with friends on her way to the house and was fortunate to find the downstairs restroom unoccupied, so she slipped inside. Adam observed Bob's departure and muttered to himself about it, catching Jim's attention. Jim paused mid-throw and inquired about Adam's comment. Adam clarified, "Bob seems to be leaving without saying goodbye or expressing gratitude for the invitation." Jim turned around and caught a glimpse of Bob exiting through the gate, suggesting that Bob might be upset because Cindy wasn't paying him attention anymore. Adam mentioned that he probably had plans with her. Adam agreed, noting that Bob was skilled at charming women, recounting instances where he had seen Bob leave a bar with attractive women. Jim turned back to the dartboard, taking careful aim when a thought struck him. How would someone enter the house without being seen? They'd leave through the gate, circle around to the front, and enter that way. Handing the darts to Adam, Jim mentioned that he would be right back before making his way toward the back door. Cindy had finished her business and was touching up her makeup. Upon opening the bathroom door, she was stunned to find Bob standing there. Before she could react, he seized her shoulders and pinned her against the doorframe, forcefully locking their lips together. In an instant, had Jim been a split second later, he would have witnessed his wife forcefully pushing Bob away. However, in that moment, she hesitated as she tried to regain her senses. It was then that Jim caught sight of them. He grabbed Bob's shoulder, pulling him away from Cindy, and with a forceful blow to Bob's solar plexus, sent him stumbling back into the washroom, where he collapsed to one knee, gasping for breath. As Cindy's brain struggled to process the rapid events, she felt overwhelmed. It all happened so quickly. She turned to find her husband, but he was nowhere to be seen. Panicked, she searched in every direction, calling out for Jim, but he was nowhere in sight. Then she heard the sound of a car starting. Rushing to the front door, Cindy watched as their car backed out and drove off. Realizing how the situation must have appeared, especially given her previous interactions with Bob and ignoring Bob, who was still gasping for breath, she dashed out the back door. The first person she encountered was Adam, who was still waiting for Jim's return, unaware of the unfolding drama. "Adam, you have to drive me home now," she pleaded, her voice trembling with panic. Confused, Adam looked at her, trying to make sense of the situation. "Cindy, what happened? Where's Jim?" "He left. He caught Bob kissing me and—" "What, is he hurt?" "No, Bob's still in the house. I'm not sure if he's hurt or not. Jim punched him really hard." Adam couldn't help but smirk. "Jim punched Bob?" Yeah, please, Adam. I have to get home so I can explain what happened. He was so mad, I'm not sure what he's going to do. I'm afraid he's planning to leave me." "I doubt that, Cindy. He's upset, but I don't think he's that upset. You didn't see him just now, Adam. I was the first one here. I doubt I'll be able to get my car out. I'm sure I'm blocked in. Please, Adam." "All right, give me a second to tell Tony we're leaving, and I'll see if we can get out of here." After briefing Tony, Adam returned, confirming their predicament. "Cindy, you'll have to call a cab." "I can't get out, but you can borrow my car." "Are you serious? Thank you." Grateful and relieved, Cindy hurriedly got into Adam's car, knowing she needed to reach Jim before it was too late. There was only about a foot of space between Adam's car and the garage door. He turned the wheel completely to the right and edged forward until his front bumper gently nudged the door. Then he reversed, turning the wheel the other way until his rear bumper lightly touched the car behind him. He repeated this maneuver several times until he could back out onto his brother's meticulously kept front lawn, leaving only about 2 inches of clearance between his car and the one behind. Throughout the journey, Cindy remained silent, lost in her thoughts. She couldn't shake the image of her husband's enraged expression from her mind. His fury was unlike anything she had seen before, and his physical reaction was unprecedented. As they approached her driveway, anxiety gripped her. She dreaded facing whatever awaited her at home. Soon they turned into her driveway, with Adam parking behind Jim's car. Adam offered to accompany her inside, but she hesitated briefly before declining, expressing gratitude but insisting that she would handle the situation herself, since she felt responsible for it. Upon exiting the car, she signaled to Adam that she would manage and climb the porch stairs, each step filled with apprehension. Entering the house, she prepared herself for what she might encounter. Jim was nowhere to be seen, and she worried he might be upstairs packing. Just as she began ascending the stairs to confront him, she heard the coffee grinder. A glimmer of hope flickered within her as she thought, "He's making coffee?" Jim, observing her silently from the kitchen doorway, broke the silence by asking if her lover had brought her home. Cindy clarified to Jim that Bob was not her lover, mentioning that the last time she saw him, he was still on the bathroom floor struggling to catch his breath. Jim nodded in response, but remained silent, which unsettled Cindy. She had expected some kind of reaction from him, whether it be anger or embarrassment. Since Jim seemed unwilling to speak, Cindy decided to take the initiative. "He caught me off guard, Jim. I wasn't willingly engaging with him. He ambushed me as soon as I opened the door, pushing me against it and kissing me." "I didn't see you resisting him," Jim shot back. "You intervened before I had the chance. I was stunned. It took me a moment to comprehend what was happening. But you struck him before I could push him away." She still wasn't certain if her husband's behavior indicated genuine calmness, or if it was merely the quiet before a storm. Throughout their conversation, he remained occupied with his tasks. She almost wished he would express his anger openly. His apparent indifference left her feeling anxious. "Well?" she prompted. "Well, what?" he replied, hitting the start button on the coffee maker. "Jim, I've never seen you so angry before. I honestly expected you to be packing your bags when I got home." "Don't tempt me," he growled, his voice rising slightly. "You're damn right I'm angry. That stunt you pulled was immature and disrespectful. The only reason I'm not even more upset is because most people at the party knew what you were doing. But you know what infuriates me more than you making a spectacle of yourself? The fact that you chose to trust one of your shallow friends over me. Have I ever lied to you, huh?" His suppressed anger began to surface. "Have I ever given you a reason to doubt me or be jealous?" "No, never." She had never heard him refer to her friends as shallow before, but she chose not to address it. "Honey, I know how outgoing you are. I've witnessed it. You can strike up a friendship with anyone in minutes, even women. You may not realize it, but I've seen the way they look at you when you walk away. I know they'd be willing to drop their inhibitions in an instant." "Oh, that's ridiculous. You're making me sound like Brad Pitt or something." The situation was escalating. She needed to diffuse it before it escalated further. "Jim, all I'm saying is that you have a charming personality. People are drawn to you. I just want you to understand that some women interpret that as flirting. They might think you're available, married or not." She hoped she had eased the tension. "So how does that justify you believing that I go around kissing waitresses and trusting your friend over your husband?" Damn, she thought. She had hoped to avoid that question. Their argument persisted for another 20 minutes without resolution, both refusing to yield on the fundamental issue of trust. Despite their disagreement, neither of them opted to sleep on the couch or in separate rooms. But Cindy sensed that intimacy was out of the question. He wasn't in a forgiving mood, and she wasn't willing to degrade herself by attempting to change his mind. The following Tuesday, Jim met Tony for a drink after work. Jim was already seated and had just taken a sip from his beer when his friend arrived, wearing a wide grin. "Yo, Rocky, how's Adrian?" Tony quipped, attempting a Stallone impression. Jim glanced at his friend. "Isn't Rocky the one who talks like that?" "Yeah, but I can't pull off a Burgess Meredith impression, so you'll have to settle for what you get," he chuckled, taking a seat beside Jim. He ordered a beer. "Seriously, how are things between you two right now?" "We're barely on speaking terms. I'm still angry, and she knows it, so she tends to avoid me." "When are you going to cut her some slack? Most people at the party didn't even realize there was any tension between you two. After you left, some folks were asking about you and Cindy." "What did you tell them?" "I said something unexpected came up and you had to leave." Nobody questioned it. They probably assumed you two were eager to get home and, well, you know. Tony chuckled. "Yeah, well, we haven't exactly been eager to get in bed since the party. Speaking of which, what's the deal with Bob? Is he plotting revenge?" "I doubt it. Adam filled me in on what happened before he drove Cindy home. When I went inside, Bob was just getting back on his feet. He mentioned you landed a sucker punch." "I sure did," Jim interjected. "Well, he was talking about getting back at you, but I warned him to steer clear of you. I told him you're the toughest guy around and that I've seen you take down guys twice your size. I even threw in my favorite Bible quote." "You have a favorite Bible quote? I didn't know that." "Sure do. Yeah, though he walks through the valley of the shadow of pass away, he fears no evil, for he's the toughest and meanest SOB in the valley." "That's you." Jim couldn't help but laugh. "That's nonsense and you know it," he retorted. "Of course I know it and you know it. But Bob doesn't. I think I scared him enough to make him think twice before messing with you." "Well, I appreciate that, buddy." They both grinned and took another sip of their drinks. "You know what really annoys me?" Jim began. "That she doesn't believe me about not kissing some waitress." "Are you absolutely sure you didn't? Maybe just a peck on the cheek or something like that?" "No, he trailed off, and Tony could tell from his expression that he recalled something. "Aha, you did kiss her, didn't you?" "No, she kissed me," Jim responded. "Damn, I know what this is all about." The following day, Cindy was surprised to see Jim walking into her office at work. He immediately informed her that he was taking her to lunch. Before she could react, assuming it was his way of apologizing, she expressed gratitude but mentioned it was a bit early and asked if he could wait about 20 minutes. Jim reassured her, saying there was no need to wait. He had already spoken to her boss, explained the situation as a minor family emergency, and arranged for an extended lunch hour, which her boss agreed to. Jim urged her to come along, and Cindy, feeling apprehensive as she wasn't aware of any family emergency, followed him to the car. As she got in, Jim held the door for her. She questioned him about their destination and the nature of the family emergency. He didn't directly answer her question but instructed her to call her friend and get the name of the restaurant where the alleged incident occurred. When she asked why, he simply told her to trust him and mentioned that he believed he had figured something out. Reluctantly, she called her friend and obtained the restaurant's name, Deary's on Holman Avenue. He responded with a smile, commenting on the coincidence that they were headed exactly there. Cindy remained silent but felt increasingly uneasy. She couldn't fathom why he would want to revisit the scene, except perhaps to confront her. Would he flirt with the waitress in front of her? She knew he wouldn't do that. She decided to wait and see what unfolded. The journey to the restaurant took nearly half an hour, during which Cindy agonized over numerous scenarios. She was almost in tears when they arrived. Jim placed his hand on her back and guided her inside. She knew trouble awaited her the moment they entered. "Damn," she muttered quietly. Jim found a booth and had Cindy sit first, then joined her. "Well, 'cause looks like you brought your better half today." Cindy blushed with embarrassment. "Hi, Marilyn," she greeted their waitress. "Hi, Cindy. How did you manage to get my cousin here for a real lunch, and with his wife no less?" "Every time I see him, he's in such a hurry he can barely eat," she joked. Jim wasn't about to let Cindy off easily. "Cindy seems to think you and I are having a passionate affair," he announced. Cindy waited for the punchline before responding. "What? No, Marilyn, that's not true." Cindy turned to her husband. "Jim, come on, I made a mistake. I apologize." She faced Marilyn again. "A friend told me last week that he kissed a waitress here. I didn't even know you worked here." "But we haven't," Jim interrupted. "You gave me a peck on the cheek when I arrived." "Oh gosh, Cindy, I didn't mean anything by it." Jim hadn't visited in a while, and it was just a friendly gesture. "Marilyn, don't worry about it," Cindy assured her. "I understand now. My friend misled me into thinking Jim had a thing with a waitress here. I'll be giving her a piece of my mind later." "I'd like to hear that," Jim challenged. Cindy looked at him and accepted the challenge. "All right," she said, retrieving her phone from her purse. Both Jim and Marilyn listened in on Cindy's side of the conversation. "Hi, Linda. Not too good. You know that waitress who you said was kissing Jim? You know who that was?" "Jim's cousin." "Yeah, his cousin." "No, I didn't appreciate you telling me. You made it sound like he was having an affair or something." "I don't care what you thought. I don't care if you think you see him screwing somebody in the middle of the floor. From now on, keep your gossip to yourself. Yeah, you too." She almost hurt her finger disconnecting the call. Jim had a hunch it was Linda stirring up trouble. She frequently made derogatory remarks about her own husband. Cindy was worked up after the call. "I truly apologize to both of you. Jim was right. I should have known better." "You have a few more apologies to make when you get home tonight," Jim reminded her. "You're going to apologize to Tony, Barbara, and Jenny." "What about Bob?" "You can tell Bob to take a hike. You don't pursue a married woman no matter how much of a flirt she is." Marilyn, still standing nearby, asked, "Who's Bob?" "Her boyfriend," Jim joked. "Boyfriend?" she questioned. "Don't listen to him, Marilyn. I made a mistake and he's not done rubbing my nose in it yet." "It sounds like you two had quite a weekend," Marilyn observed. "Let's just say I'm pretty sure Cindy learned a lesson about trust," Jim replied. Cindy was more than a little embarrassed. Her face flushed as she opened the menu. "So Marilyn, what do you recommend?" Later after dinner, Cindy spent almost an hour on the phone apologizing to their friends, including Jenny. That night, they both lay undressed in bed. "Are you still mad?" she asked. "It depends." "On what?" "On whether you still think I would cheat on you." "I never really believed you'd cheat on me. I was worried you might give some woman the wrong impression. I just didn't want you leading her on." He considered her words and remembered how angry he felt watching her flirt with Bob. He'd never admit it, but he did understand her perspective a bit better now. Just as he was about to tell her he forgave her, he felt her hand slide down his body and start tickling his balls. "Come on, honey, you can't stay mad at me," she cooed. Maybe he decided he might not tell her he forgave her just yet. Her fingers gently wrapped around his manhood and slowly started stroking it up and down. Within seconds, he felt himself getting hard. Jim closed his eyes and let out a small sigh as her long red hair teased his skin. The loving touch of her lips sent shivers down his spine as she kissed the head of his fully engorged friend. "Oh, God," he groaned. She already knew she was forgiven, but Cindy wanted to take it to the limit. She swung one leg over his torso and guided him inside her. She closed her eyes as she leaned forward, resting her hands on his tight abs as she moved back and forth, driving him deeper and deeper. "Oh, babe, I'm not going to last long," he groaned. "Me either," she replied. Moments later, she threw her head back as her body stiffened. That was Jim's cue. and it was right on time as they both surrendered to an intense pleasure. A month later, Cindy and Barbara were having lunch together. "You and Jim seem to be getting along. Does he still flirt with waitresses?" "Not as much," Cindy replied. "He's still his friendly self, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I love that about him, but he does seem to pull back now and then." "That's all you really wanted, isn't it?" "Exactly." Barbara had to ask her next question, even though she thought she knew the answer. "So, have you heard from Bob lately?" "No, and I'm a little insulted, to tell you the truth. One punch, and he just disappears. The wimp." They both laughed at that.
Growing up in a small rural town, I was always the quiet, observant one. The vast open fields and the endless horizon offered plenty of time to think, dream, and develop a sharp eye. As a teenager, I spent countless hours with my father's old hunting rifle, aiming at tin cans and small game. It wasn't just a pastime. It became an obsession to perfect each shot, to understand the subtleties of wind, distance, and timing. When I joined the military, those skills found purpose. As a sniper, I honed my abilities to near perfection. The hours of lying in wait, patient and invisible, taught me not just the art of the shot, but the discipline of focus. But life outside the military wasn't kind. The transition from soldier to civilian was a harsh one, especially with the burden of a dishonorable discharge hanging over my head. A single lapse in judgment, a punch thrown in anger at the wrong superior, cost me everything I had built. Lost and aimless, I drifted until an unconventional opportunity presented itself. An outlet for my skills and a way to carve out a new life, even if it meant walking the shadows. These moments bring me back to the desert. It's fitting, I suppose, as my crosshairs currently rest on a figure framed perfectly in the distance. I am not a terrorist nor a common criminal, yet here, in this moment, I am the villain. My target is a middle-aged banker, perspiring heavily despite the air conditioning. Oblivious to the world outside his hotel room, he lies entangled with a younger colleague. My mission? To ensure his story ends tonight. The contract came through encrypted channels, the payment settled in cryptocurrency. I don't know who hired me, nor do I care. By the time the authorities piece together what happened, I'll be nothing but a ghost, leaving behind no traceable steps. I keep watching through the scope. I'm not a voyeur, but I need the right moment to fire. For various reasons, I can't take the shot while they're still in the act. Usually, when the guy finishes, he either rolls over or gets up, and that's my cue. I adjust the scope slightly, scanning the visible part of the room through the window. Aside from the couple, there's no one there. I glance at her. She's a beauty. The contract specifies she's not to be injured, not physically, at least. I can't predict how witnessing her lover's head explode as he heads to the bathroom might scar her mentally. I look away briefly to stay alert. Getting too focused on the target could put me in danger. I'm here alone, without backup or cover, so I have to ensure my position is secure. It is. I'm on a rooftop across the street from the hotel where the banker is staying. I return to the scope. They're close to finishing. I shift my position and confirm nothing in the environment has changed. Then it happens. He arches his back, cries out in climax, trembles a few times, and then goes still. As expected, he gets off her and heads to the bathroom. I complete the task with precision, disappearing into the night before anyone notices. By the time law enforcement arrives, I'm miles away. I stash my gear in one of several storage units I maintain under different names, all prepaid in cash. On the drive home, I reflect once again on how I ended up in this line of work. How did I become a hitman specializing almost exclusively in cheating spouses? The shooting part is simple. I've always been good with a rifle. Growing up on a farm, I hunted regularly and developed a knack for precision, especially with rifles. I could make shots no one else could, almost instinctively. When I enlisted in the Marines and went to sniper school, I learned the technical aspects: trajectory, wind resistance, ballistics. But I rarely needed those skills. I could make shots by instinct that even seasoned snipers struggled to replicate with their calculations. I likely would have had a stellar career in the Marine Corps, but then something happened that changed everything and set me on this path: a cheating spouse. Gabrielle was a petite, dark-haired French girl I met in a bar while on leave. She was lively, attractive, and alluring in ways that stirred all kinds of thoughts. She spent the evening with my best friend Bobby and me, dancing with each of us in turn. By the end of the night, it was clear there was a spark between her and Bobby. With a forced smile, I did the only thing a good friend could. "Good luck, Bobby," I said with a grin that didn't reach my eyes. then headed back to base alone. After that, whenever they went out, they were inseparable. I often found myself the third wheel, or she'd bring along a friend to keep me company. After 3 months, Bobby showed me the engagement ring he'd bought her. "Wow, Bobby," I said, inspecting the sizable diamond. "That's a rock. Are you sure you're ready for this?" "When you know, you know," he laughed, striking a mock-wise pose. "I'm not letting her get away." The look Gabrielle gave when Bobby proposed that night stuck with me. I expected excitement, maybe joy, but for a moment, there was a flash of calculation in her eyes before she put on the appropriate reaction. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to ruin his moment, but I couldn't shake my unease. As best man, I organized the bachelor party, and let me tell you, it was legendary. Half the platoon was there, and the night was a blur of drinks, laughter, and chaos. We had to carry Bobby back to his bunk, and he remembered almost nothing the next day. Naturally, there were dancers. What's a bachelor party without them? But I ensured Bobby stayed out of trouble. Before planning the party, I had even spoken to Gabrielle about boundaries. If she'd said no dancers, I told the guys, then there wouldn't have been any. I didn't want Bobby divorced before he was married. The wedding was small, attended by her parents, a few friends, and some guys from our platoon. As I mentioned before, I was the best man. 2 months later, we were deployed to the desert for a 3-month tour. I'll never forget that patrol. Our mission was to search a village believed to harbor rebels. My spotter and I had scouted a vantage point where I could provide overwatch for the team. It wasn't perfect. There were areas I couldn't see, but it was the best option available. Bobby had been acting strange all day, unusually anxious and short-tempered, even with me, which was out of character. "What's wrong with you?" I asked, concerned about his erratic behavior. "Nothing," he replied with a forced grin. "Just itching to get going." That was the last conversation I ever had with Bobby. He didn't come back from that patrol. I didn't see what happened since his position was out of my sight line, but his team reported that when they encountered the enemy, Bobby stood up, shouted something like, "Go, you fools!" and charged, firing his M16 from the hip like he was in a movie. He didn't make it 3 meters before they cut him down. As his best friend, it fell to me to gather his belongings for shipment back to the U.S. That's when I found the letter. "Dear Bobby, I know this is the coward's way, but I have to tell you that I've been seeing someone else, and we've fallen in love. I'm leaving you so we can be together. I want you to know I truly loved you, but the time apart made me realize I'm not in love with you. You deserve better. It's best if we end things so you can find someone who loves you the way you deserve. Please don't hate me. John says you have a month left on tour, so by the time you return, I'll be moving out. I won't ask for anything in the divorce and hope we can remain friends if you can forgive me. Best wishes, Gabrielle." "Damn witch," I yelled after reading it. Everything about Bobby's behavior suddenly made sense, and I knew there had to be consequences. My tour was cut short so I could escort Bobby's body back to the U.S. When we unloaded the coffin, Gabrielle approached it, tears streaming down her face. She placed her hand on the casket, but I stopped her. "Don't you dare," I said, my voice cold. "What do you mean?" she asked, shocked. "You betrayed him," I hissed, stepping between her and the coffin. She recoiled, stunned, and that's when I noticed the officer with her. It was Colonel John Edwards. My stomach churned as I saw him drape an arm over her shoulders in a gesture of comfort. "What the hell?" I snapped, unable to hold back my rage. "Are you the one she left him for?" "Stand down, Marine," the colonel ordered, his tone commanding. "How dare you?" I shot back. "You sent a Dear John letter to an active duty soldier right before a mission. What did you think would happen?" "That's enough," he barked. I couldn't contain myself. My first punch landed squarely on his throat, dropping him to his knees. A kick to the groin sent him to the ground, and I followed with 4 strikes to his face before security restrained me. My satisfaction came later when we were both court-martialed, him for misconduct, me for attacking a superior officer. He was discharged without pension, and I spent a year in military prison, leaving with a dishonorable discharge. After my release, I couldn't move on. It took me a year to track down Gabrielle, who had relocated to Canada and was living with a French-Canadian businessman. I didn't know what happened to Colonel Edwards. He'd disappeared from the picture. I considered simply shooting her from a distance. It would have been easy. No security, no cameras. But she wouldn't understand why, and I wanted it to be personal. I wanted her to know who and why. She made it easy. One night she was at a dance with friends. True to form, she was cheating. The guy kissing her wasn't her businessman. I watched from the bar as he whispered in her ear, and they moved toward the exit. I followed, circling the building, and saw them heading to an SUV in the parking lot. I waited by my car to see if they'd drive off, but when he opened the back door, I knew it was happening right there. Quietly, I approached. As I got closer, I saw Gabrielle bent over the back seat with the guy behind her. I didn't want to eliminate him. I had no issue with him. I quickly strangled him until he collapsed unconscious on the ground. It took her a few seconds to realize the movement had stopped. When she turned, she saw me standing there, pointing my Glock 9 at her. Her eyes widened in recognition, and she opened her mouth to speak. I cut her off. "Bobby says hi, witch." I acted swiftly, ensuring the mission's completion before stepping away unnoticed. Before the sound of shot fire reached the bar, I was already gone, crossing back into the United States in under 4 hours. Avenging Bobby gave me an idea. Surely, many people were dealing with infidelity at this very moment. Some might seek reconciliation, others would opt for divorce. But there would always be those seeking a more permanent solution, and I had the skills to provide it. That's how I became a hitman specializing in cheating spouses. Overall, it's an easy job. These are ordinary people, unaware they've been marked and without any personal security. After about 4 years in the business, earning significant money, I met Juliana. She was the finance manager at a car dealership where I went to buy a new car. Bright, sharp, and a captivating conversationalist, she was stunning. Just under 5 feet tall in heels, with legs that seemed endless, jet black hair, and a figure that could stop traffic. From the start, there was chemistry. While discussing financing, I decided to test the waters. "Would you like to have dinner with me sometime?" I asked. She smiled, her eyes lighting up. "I'd love that." In less than 30 minutes, we had a date planned. A year and a half later, after a whirlwind courtship, Juliana and I were married in a lavish ceremony with over 200 guests, including her family and friends, my parents, and a handful of military buddies. To the world and to Juliana, I was a successful financial manager, working from home. I explained my frequent trips as client meetings, which made for a perfect cover. Life with Juliana was great. She supported my finance work even when I traveled. She always welcomed me home passionately, and our closeness was frequent and enthusiastic, sometimes daily. Juliana rarely went out alone and always maintained proper boundaries when interacting with others, even at dances. I had no doubt she loved me, just as I loved her. My contracts came through the dark web. I never met clients in person, only communicated online, and required undeniable proof of infidelity. Clients never knew when or where the target would be eliminated. Payments were made to a virtual account, released only upon completion of the contract. If I couldn't fulfill a job, I refunded the money, though that hadn't happened yet. With no personal connections to the sufferers and payment in untraceable cryptocurrency, law enforcement never came close to me. Most of my targets were men, about 10 to 1. When men cheated, women often wanted them dead. When women cheated, their partners usually wanted the other man eliminated. Of course, there were exceptions, but I had no moral qualms about the work. Clients paid well, and I believed cheaters got what they deserved. Life continued smoothly. After 3 years of marriage, Juliana and I had our first child, followed by another just 18 months later. We provided a stable home, and our kids grew up well, eventually attending college fully paid for. As the kids left home, Juliana, feeling the emptiness, returned to work at the dealership. Meanwhile, I worked mostly from home with occasional business trips. I decided it was time to retire. 1 or 2 more contracts would fully fund my pension. I was tired of the life. Scanning the job board I used for contracts, I saw 2 available jobs, one nearby and another across the country. I chose the local contract, thinking it would be my penultimate job. The target was a man named Peter Miller. The attached dossier was detailed. Peter was a group insurance salesman covering 3 states, including mine, and traveled frequently. He was married to Janine, with 3 young children, Paul, Mary, and Siobhan. Reports from private investigators included evidence of him having affairs with 4 different women. He was currently staying at a hotel less than 50 miles away for a week. The dossier listed the hotel and even his room number. It noted he often traveled with a woman who wasn't his wife, though it was unclear if he had company this time. The photos in the dossier were typical. Pictures of Peter, his wife, and his kids. I always found it odd that photos of the children were included, but they always were. The research was thorough. I Googled the hotel, confirming Peter's room was on the 5th floor east side. A quick check of Google Earth showed an unfinished building down the block. From its upper floors, I'd have a clear line of sight into Peter's room, as the surrounding buildings were only 3 stories high. That evening, I informed Juliana of my upcoming business trip. "I have to leave for a trip next week," I said. "I'll head out Monday morning and be back by Thursday, maybe Friday." Juliana glanced up from her book. "I thought you were done with those trips," she remarked, her tone curious rather than accusatory. "This might be the last one," I replied. "But if this doesn't pan out, there could be one more." She nodded, then smiled. "That means we'll have the whole weekend together." We didn't spend the entire weekend in bed, but it was a close call. After a fantastic Friday night, we spent Saturday running errands before enjoying dinner at our favorite restaurant. The rest of Saturday night and most of Sunday were dedicated to each other in bed. On Monday morning, I left the house, drove to the airport, and parked my car. From there, I walked about a mile to a nearby warehouse where I kept an inconspicuous car for jobs like this, a gray Toyota sedan that was utterly forgettable. Registered under a fake ID strong enough to pass police scrutiny, it was perfect for my purposes. I positioned myself on the 7th floor of an abandoned construction site, my rifle trained on the target's hotel room window. Just after noon, the man entered the room. He fiddled with his belongings for a while, made a brief phone call, and then left. I didn't follow him. I knew he'd return, so I settled in to wait. With the site abandoned, I wasn't worried about being discovered. He returned after 6 p.m., visibly hurried. He went straight to the bathroom to shower, then walked back to the bedroom. Nothing unusual, but his physique didn't explain his appeal to women. Thin and uninspiring, it was clear his charm must lie in his words rather than his body. After about 30 minutes, he dressed and left again. I ate some food and waited, confident he'd return with a companion. I planned to snap photographic proof of his infidelity before putting a bullet in his skull. The contract was silent on the woman's fate, so I'd spare her. I didn't know if she was a cheater or just a lonely woman drawn to this man. Without that knowledge, I had no reason to liquidate her. It was past midnight when the lights in the room flicked on again. Looking through my scope, I saw the target enter with a tall, dark-haired woman. She pinned him against the door and dropped to her knees almost immediately. From my angle, a couple of floors above, I could only see his torso down as her back was to me. I wasn't concerned. They'd eventually move further into the room. Still entangled, they undressed as they moved toward the bed. By the time they reached it, she was down to her underwear, and he was completely without clothes. He pushed her onto the bed, kissing her as she reclined. From my vantage point, I could see only the tops of their bodies. Then she tilted her head back, and I adjusted my aim to focus on her face. In that moment, I had to summon all my self-control to stop myself from pulling the trigger. Instead, I activated the camera linked to my scope and captured a digital photo. For the next 3 hours, I recorded photos and videos as the couple had sex. They didn't bother closing the blinds or turning off the lights, making themselves visible to anyone on the street. Finally, exhausted, they had one last session before falling asleep. When the lights went out, I leaned back, my heart racing and my mind in chaos. I opened the first photo I'd taken through the scope. The woman was arching her back, her eyes wide with pleasure. I zoomed in, studying her face and those familiar eyes. My blood ran cold. The eyes staring back at me belonged to Juliana, my wife. Thoughts flooded my mind. I couldn't proceed with the hit. One of the key elements of my work was avoiding any connection to the sufferers or their partners. If I eliminated them now, I'd be the first person the police questioned. My alibi wouldn't hold under scrutiny. Beyond that, I wasn't ready to decide what to do about Juliana. The anger surging through me made it tempting to shoot her on impulse. But I knew that wouldn't solve anything. I needed to think about her, about our children, and about the consequences of my actions. Whatever choice I made, I'd have to live with it for the rest of my life. The thought crossed my mind. If I abandoned the contract, someone else might take it and be less discerning about sparing the idiot's partner. I also had to consider whether this was a setup. Could someone have orchestrated this situation for me to catch Juliana cheating, just to mess with me? I doubted it was law enforcement. They wouldn't risk putting someone in my sights, knowing I could act immediately. But it could be someone connected to a past contract, seeking revenge. No, I had to finish the job, but it had to look random or natural to avoid any follow-up from the authorities. Juliana could wait. I packed up my gear and stored it in my designated storage unit. I wouldn't be using it for this job. While there, I grabbed some extra electronic equipment. Back at the hotel, I found their cars and discreetly placed GPS trackers on both. The next morning, after they left, Juliana returned to my house, and he went about his usual activities. I used the opportunity to enter his hotel room with an electronic keycard. A thorough search revealed nothing surprising, just some blood pressure meds and Viagra in his luggage. I installed several hidden cameras around the room. I had 4 days to finish the contract, and since I'd told Juliana I wouldn't be back until Thursday or Friday, there was no need for frequent communication. I booked a room at the hotel using one of my fake IDs. Staying legally would simplify things. I also noticed the hotel's surveillance cameras were only at the entrance and in the elevators, none in the stairwells or hallways near the rooms. Throughout the day, I tracked their movements while making preparations. Juliana went to work, hit the gym, and then returned home. Later, the man's tracker indicated he was heading toward my house. I silently fumed, vowing that if she let him inside, I'd eliminated them both without caring about the consequences. Thankfully, he stopped about 5 blocks away. Just after 6 in the evening, Juliana called. "Hey, baby," she said. "Hi, honey, I missed you last night. I thought you'd call," I replied. "Sorry. I fell asleep in front of the TV, and when I woke up, it was late," she said smoothly, without hesitation. "I thought so. That's why I didn't bother you," I said, clenching my fist. This was the first time I knew Juliana had lied to me. There had likely been others, but I hadn't caught them until now. "How's the meeting going?" she asked sweetly. An unexpected complication came up. Someone showed up at the meeting who raised some questions. I think I can close the deal, but it might take a little longer than expected. "Once it's done, though, no more business trips," I said, forcing my voice to remain calm. "So, you'll be back Friday instead of Thursday?" she asked, her tone sounding almost pleased. "You don't sound too disappointed," I said, my words dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, no, not at all," she replied warmly. "I'm just happy this is your last trip. If it takes 1 extra day, it's worth it." "What are your plans tonight?" I asked, keeping her talking. "I just got back from the gym, so I'm going to relax in front of the TV," she said casually. "Then I'll go to bed early." "Well, remember what my mom always said? If you're not in bed by 11, you have to go home," I joked. She laughed softly. "I'll call you tomorrow night. I miss you." "Good night." I ended the call without saying more. She didn't seem to notice. My next call was to a chemist friend who sometimes supplied me when I needed unconventional methods. I told him I needed something that would mimic a heart attack. By the time I returned to the hotel after picking it up, the target was back in his room. I accessed the camera feed and saw him on the phone. "Hi, Jules," he said cheerfully, making me wince. Juliana hated when people shortened her name, yet she let this guy call her Jules. It was a small thing, but it stung. "No, I just got back. Give me an hour and I'll meet you downstairs. Say 7:30? I'll make you forget all about that poor a-hole you married," he added with a smug grin. After listening to her response, he softened. No, Juliana, I didn't mean to upset you. Baby, please." He stared at his phone in frustration. "Crap," he muttered. I smiled grimly. It seemed his night of fun had hit a snag. Moments later, my phone rang. It was Juliana. "Hi, baby," she said. "How are you?" "I'm fine. What's up?" I asked, masking my irritation. "Nothing," she replied quickly. "I just realized I didn't say I love you earlier, and I wanted to make sure you knew." Her voice sounded slightly off, almost upset. "Are you okay?" I asked cautiously. "You sound different." "I'm fine," she insisted too quickly. "I just miss you, that's all." Her phone beeped, signaling another call. Glancing at the camera feed, I saw Peter on his phone again. It was clear he was calling her. "Why don't we talk for a bit?" I suggested. "It'll almost feel like I'm there." I waited to see what choice she would make. Keep talking to me, or return to her lover for more sweet talk and another night together. She chose poorly. "No, I'm just being silly," she said quickly. "Listen, my mom's trying to call. I just wanted to tell you I love you. Good night." Before I could stop myself, the words escaped. "Good night, Jules," I said coldly. I hung up, wondering if she had caught the icy tone in my voice. Back in Peter's room, his phone rang again. His grin returned as he answered. "Hi, baby. Yes, I'm so sorry. I know you hate it when I say bad things about him. It's just my insecurity. I just want to be the best lover for you and make you feel as good as you make me feel." He paused, nodding. "Okay. Tomorrow, then. How about dinner at Archie's? Shall I book a table for 7? "Yes. I love you too, Juliana. Good night." Hearing him tell her I love you sent another wave of fury through me. Was she in love with this man, or was she just parroting the words? I'd find out soon enough. Shortly after he called room service to order food and beers, it was time for me to act. I waited for the food to arrive and for the staff to leave. Once Peter had started eating, I knocked on his door, standing to the side so he couldn't see me through the peephole, not that I thought he'd check. When he opened the door, his face twisted in shock as he stared down the barrel of my silenced Glock. "Good evening, Peter," I said pleasantly. "Mind if I come in?" His mouth opened, but no sound came out. I stepped forward, forcing him to retreat as the door closed behind me. "What do you want?" he stammered. "I have about $500 in my wallet. You can take it." I chuckled softly. "So rude," I said, shaking my head. "I just want to have a nice chat." "What? Chat about what?" he asked, his confusion obvious. "Well, you see, my employer, someone you're quite familiar with, wants some answers," I said. "Your wife Janine has a few questions. I already have plenty of information, but there are gaps to fill. If you lie to me, I'll find out, and I'll shoot you." Peter turned pale. I don't—" "Relax," I interrupted. "I don't want to shoot you. That sounds like too much effort, and your wife would prefer to ruin you financially rather than have you dead. She thinks your kids might miss you if you were gone, but she wants the truth. And make no mistake, she'll find every woman you've been with and let their husbands know. If you tell me everything now, I'll leave this room without turning it into a crime scene." "Sound fair?" I grabbed one of the beers he'd ordered, opened it, and took a sip. "Is this the best they've got here?" I said, wrinkling my nose. Peter's eyes darted toward the door, but hopelessness settled on his face. "If I tell you everything, you won't shoot me?" he asked cautiously. "I won't shoot you," I confirmed. "I'll leave, and you can move on with your life. But I suggest you call your wife after I'm gone. Maybe if you grovel, she'll forgive you for the kids' sake." Defeated, Peter slumped into a chair. "What do you want to know?" "There are 4 women I already know about," I said, listing their names and where they lived. His stunned expression confirmed my information was accurate. "But I need more details about one. Juliana. She works at a car dealership. Tell me everything. How you met, how long it's been, the whole story." Peter hesitated, but the realization that he had no choice set in. He began haltingly. "I met Juliana 4 months ago. I went to her dealership to sell insurance, and we hit it off. She's gorgeous, charming, and has an amazing body. I couldn't resist. I asked her to lunch, and she said yes." He swallowed nervously and continued. "After lunch, she surprised me by suggesting dinner that same night. She told me her husband was out of town. That evening, we ended up at my hotel. She gave me a night I'll never forget." I grimaced but motioned for him to go on. "How often did you see her?" I asked. 8 or 9 times, he admitted. Whenever her husband was away, she'd call. If I could make it, I'd come here. I even canceled dates with my other girlfriends for her. She's better than any of them." He grinned briefly, lost in the memory, but sobered when he saw my expression. Nervously, he finished his beer and glanced at the minibar. "Can I have another?" he asked hesitantly. I nodded. "Help yourself," I said. "But let's keep this civil. It'd be unfortunate if I had to shoot you over a misunderstanding." Peter chuckled nervously, grabbed another beer, and sat back down. I pressed further. "So, Juliana was calling the shots? Do you think she's done this before?" He shrugged. "Probably. She's too skilled to be new at it. But she never let me insult her husband. She wouldn't even tell me his name. Once, I called him an a-hole and she ripped into me. That's why she didn't meet me tonight. She's still mad." I frowned. "Interesting that she's so protective of him while doing what she's doing." Peter laughed. "She's got this strange split personality. One part is the devoted wife who won't tolerate anyone disrespecting her husband. The other part is the woman who comes to me for fun. It's like she doesn't see any contradiction." I leaned back, processing his words. "I'm not sure her husband would share that perspective," I said quietly. Suddenly, Peter winced and clutched his chest. "You okay?" I asked. "Just indigestion," he muttered. "Probably the beer." He rubbed his left arm absent-mindedly, then began choking. His face turned purple and sweat poured down his forehead as he clutched his chest with both hands. "Help me," he gasped, panic in his eyes. I locked eyes with him. "Peter," I said calmly, "look at me." He raised his head weakly, barely able to breathe. "You should have stayed away from Juliana," I said coldly. "She's my wife." His eyes widened in shock just before rolling back into his head. He slumped over, motionless. I knew he was gone, though it would take another 10 to 15 minutes for his body to completely shut down. I used that time to carefully remove any evidence of my presence. I turned on the TV at a low volume and arranged the food in front of it. When his body was found, it would look like he died of a heart attack while eating dinner and watching TV. Given his blood pressure medication and Viagra, I was confident an autopsy would attribute his end of life to natural causes. I checked his body one last time to confirm he was dead, then ensured the hallway was clear. Hanging a "Do Not Disturb" sign on his door, I returned to my room. The next day, Juliana called around 5:30 p.m. "Hey baby, how was your day?" she asked cheerfully. "Great," I replied. "I resolved one issue, and am confident I can settle the last one soon. I had an idea, since this is my last business trip. How about we fly to Mexico for the weekend? I can pick you up at the airport, and we can celebrate, maybe even extend it into a vacation. You probably need a break, and it's not like you really need that job." Juliana laughed. "That sounds amazing. I'll talk to Barry tomorrow and see what he says. I'll call you tomorrow night so we can book tickets." "Perfect," I said. "What's your plan for tonight?" "Same as always," she replied. "I have some work to finish, and then I'll watch a show." I glanced at the clock, knowing she thought she had a dinner reservation at 7, and it would take at least 40 minutes for her to get there. "Dinner's ready," she said casually. "I'll talk to you tomorrow, okay?" "Okay. Enjoy your dinner and cheat," I said. "Bye, baby." "Love you," she said. I hung up without responding. At 8:30, there was a knock on Peter's door. Since I'd placed the "Do Not Disturb" sign, housekeeping hadn't entered the room. I figured Juliana had gone to the restaurant, waited, and then come to find out why Peter was late. After 20 minutes, the knock came again. The door squeaked as a hotel employee entered, followed by Juliana. They found Peter slumped over his dinner, unmoving. The employee rushed to him while Juliana stood in the doorway watching. "Is he dead?" she asked flatly. The employee checked his pulse but didn't need to. Peter was clearly gone. "Yes, he's dead." Without a word, Juliana turned and left. By the time the hotel worker realized she was gone, she was already in the elevator, leaving the hotel. The police and paramedics arrived shortly after. Upon searching the room, they found his medications and concluded he'd suffered a fatal heart attack. His medical history and the circumstances of his end of life supported the conclusion. When questioned, the hotel worker explained that a woman had asked him to check on the man. He admitted seeing her visit earlier in the week, though he didn't know her identity. The worker mentioned that Peter often entertained female guests, who he suspected were escorts, but never reported because Peter tipped generously. Once the investigation wrapped up, I retrieved my surveillance equipment, packed it away, and checked out of the hotel. Early the next morning, I returned to the parking lot and removed the GPS tracker from Peter's car before leaving. On Saturday morning, I picked up Juliana from the airport, and we headed to the villa I had rented. She squealed with delight as she looked around, especially when she saw the private pool with sun loungers. "I'm going to change," she said excitedly. "Can we talk for a minute first, Jules?" I asked. She stopped and turned toward me. "You know I don't like it when you call me that," she said. "Why not?" I asked. "You didn't seem to mind when Peter called you that." Her face turned pale, but she tried to play it off. "Who's Peter? Do you know him?" "Peter, the insurance agent, the one you've been sleeping with for the past 4 months. The one you were with Monday night, when you told me you were too tired and fell asleep without calling," I said. "I don't know what you're talking about, or what you think you've heard," she started. I placed a photo on the table between us, the one I had taken through the scope of her lying on her back, eyes wide. She sank into a chair. "Oh," she said softly. "Oh, is that all you have to say?" I asked, incredulous. She shrugged. "What do you want me to say?" "How long?" I asked. She looked me in the eye. "About 4 months. And I assume he wasn't the first," I said coldly. "Do we really have to do this?" she asked. "Do what? Confront the truth about my cheating wife?" I shot back. "Insults, really? Can't you come up with something more original? Before you start, though, there's something you need to understand," she said. "Like what? Why you did this?" I asked. I was about to suggest she couldn't control herself, but I stopped and let her speak. She began hesitantly. "We've been married a long time, haven't we?" I nodded silently, waiting for her to continue. "How many times a week do you think we have sex on average?" she asked, her voice measured but pointed. I paused to consider her question. "Well, it's slowed down a bit with age," I admitted, but before I could elaborate, she interrupted. "Exactly," she said firmly. "At first, we were like teenagers, every day, sometimes multiple times. When that phase passed, we still had Zex at least every other day, sometimes more. And the Zex was incredible. You're the best lover I've ever had. But then you started going on business trips, sometimes for weeks at a time. I was used to having Zex almost daily, and suddenly, you expected me to go without it for long stretches. She exhaled deeply, steadying herself. One night, when you were away, I decided to relieve some tension by going to the gym. But instead, I ended up going home with someone. It wasn't planned, but it satisfied the need you had awakened in me. The next day, I felt awful, terrified you'd find out, that you'd be hurt, that you might leave me. When you came back, I practically attacked you in bed every day for a week, trying to erase my guilt and make it up to you for something you didn't even know had happened. But deep down, I knew it would happen again the next time you left. And it did. She looked down briefly before meeting my eyes again. Over time, I had to accept it as the new normal, but I created some rules for myself. Her voice softened as she explained. First, I never did it when you were home. Not because I thought you'd catch me, but because I didn't need anyone else when you were here. You've always been my first and best lover. Second, I never brought anyone into our house. I wouldn't disrespect you like that. And I never allowed anyone to speak badly about you. If a man even hinted at disrespecting you, I ended things immediately. Third, I got tested regularly for STDs, not because I was afraid of getting caught, but because I refused to put you at risk. I also made sure I couldn't get pregnant. I used an IUD and birth control implants. When we decided to have children, I stopped all of that. If you want proof, I have DNA tests for the kids. She leaned closer, her voice trembling slightly but resolute. Yes, I've done this the entire time we've been together. You turn me on so much that I can't go without. A day or two is fine, but beyond that, I needed an outlet. That's all that ever was. Physical. I've never had feelings for any of them. The only man I've ever loved is you. When you told me this was your last business trip, I was overjoyed. I thought I wouldn't need second-rate substitutes anymore because I'd finally have the best at home. Her voice cracked, and she looked away for a moment before finishing. The irony is, what might have been my last time with someone else turned out to be the time I got caught. Your last time? I asked skeptically. Those photos are from Monday. You said you can't go more than 2 days without Zex. Do you expect me to believe you didn't go out Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday? She chuckled lightly. On Tuesday, he called to say he was back at the hotel, but he started bad-mouthing you again. I told him it was over and I wouldn't see him. Later, he called to apologize. I forgave him but said I was done for the night. We planned to meet on Wednesday instead. He even offered to take me to dinner as an apology. So, the call you got on Tuesday while we were talking, I asked, wasn't from your mom? For the first time, she looked genuinely guilty. No, it wasn't her, she said softly. I hated lying to you. Not enough to stop doing it, I replied coldly. Her eyes widened. Wait, you called me Jules during that call. I remember thinking it was odd. Did you already know then? The photos were sent to me Tuesday morning, I explained, along with transcripts of earlier calls. She sighed heavily. I'm so sorry you had to find out like this. It must have been awful. Let's stay on track, I said firmly. You didn't see him Tuesday, but what about the rest of the week? Her expression shifted and she nodded slightly. We were supposed to have dinner Wednesday night, she admitted. You mean when you were supposedly watching your show? I asked with thinly veiled sarcasm. I really did watch it. It's a good series. But I wasn't fully focused, she confessed. That evening, meeting him was just fulfilling a physical need. For me, it was like going out for lunch with a friend. I need to eat, and if you're not there, I'll go with someone else. I know it's hard for you to understand, but that's how I viewed it. And I never called it making love. That's something I've only done with you. You're stalling, I said bluntly. Stop dancing around what actually happened Wednesday. I'm not stalling, she said, her tone defensive. As I said, we were supposed to meet for dinner, but he never showed. I waited at the restaurant for 45 minutes. I was furious. I've never been stood up before. So I went to his hotel. His car was in the parking lot, so I knew he was there, but he didn't answer the door. I asked the manager to open it, and we found him face down in his steak, dead as a worm. The doctors said he'd been taking blood pressure meds and mixed them with Viagra, which you should never do. It probably caused a massive heart attack. Well, I said dryly, at least he didn't die while he was entertaining you. That would have been inconvenient. Her eyes widened slightly, then she chuckled bitterly. I never thought of that. It would have caused such a mess. His poor wife would have found out everything. I think she already knew, I said. In fact, I suspect she's the one who sent me the photos. Juliana nodded slowly. At least I don't have to wonder if you'll be seeing him again, I remarked, and she gave a faint, wry smile. I won't apologize for what I did, she said. It was something I needed to do, but I am deeply sorry for hurting you and for the way you found out. I was counting the days until your business trips ended so I wouldn't have to do this anymore. But as long as you kept leaving, I knew it would continue. All I could do was minimize the risks and hope that, if you ever found out, your love for me would be strong enough to understand. Why didn't you just come to me? I asked. We could have worked something out. I could have handled things differently. Maybe even taken you with me on trips. She shook her head. I didn't want to be the kind of wife who nitpicks about how you provide the lifestyle we have. You love your work, and we've had an amazing life together. I didn't plan this. It just happened. By the time I realized how far it had gone, it was too late to take it back. I stared at her for a long time, lost in thought. So, she finally asked, what happens now? I stood and went to the kitchen, opening a bottle of wine. Pouring us each a glass, I set the bottle on the table and handed her one. I sat back down and drained half of mine in one gulp. I don't know, I said honestly. I need to think carefully. We've been together for so long, and I thought you loved me as much as I loved you. Yes, we had a great bed life. And yes, we were intimate often. But you weren't the only one who struggled when I left. I also went without sex for weeks, even months. I had opportunities to have lunch with other women, but I stayed true to our vows. I can't understand how you could let your physical need override everything. Our promises, our marriage, our life together. Was it just for sex? Are you going to claim some kind of sex dependence? Do we need to send you to therapy? She started to speak, but I raised a hand. No, please, let me finish. I let you explain, so give me the same courtesy. I refilled her glass and then mine. I have so many questions. How can you separate sex and love so easily? I always thought men were the ones who could do that, not women. If you're being honest about not loving any of them, then you risked everything for bad sex. How do you think that makes me feel? And what about the future? Men's sex drives decrease with age while some women's increase. Am I supposed to come home one day and find some young guy in our bed because I can't keep up? How can I live with myself knowing our entire marriage was a lie? Dozens, maybe hundreds of men over the years? You say you got tested, but that doesn't eliminate the risk. You could have given me something deadly, HIV even. You could have eliminated us both. Where would that leave our children? Her face tightened, and she began absent-mindedly rubbing her left arm. I smiled grimly. Peter was a piece of trash, I said, but he caught feelings for you. He told me he even canceled dates with other women whenever you called. Her eyes widened in shock. When did you talk to Peter? Oh, I said, my tone chilling. We had a chat the night he died. I wanted to make sure you'd never see him again. Panic crept into her face. What did you do to him? She asked, her voice trembling. I leaned forward, my voice low and cold. What happened to him was a consequence of his actions, and now you understand the price of betrayal. I sat there in silence after my revelation, letting the weight of my words sink into the space between us. Juliana froze, her face an unreadable mask, but her hands trembled slightly, her fingers clutching the stem of her wine glass as though it was the only thing tethering her to reality. The air felt heavy, oppressive, and in that moment I saw the flicker of fear in her eyes. Not fear of the truth, but fear of what I might do next. I've given you everything, I continued, my voice steady and devoid of the anger I thought I'd feel. A home, a family, a life you said you wanted, and yet it wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand, silencing her before she could form an excuse. Don't you dare try to justify this anymore. You've said your piece and I've listened, but now I need you to listen. I stood and began to pace, the wine in my glass sloshing dangerously close to the edge. You know, it's funny. All these years I thought I was the one living a lie. My job, my secrets, they were my burden to bear alone. I justified it because I told myself I was protecting you, protecting us. But the real lie wasn't my work. It was this, us, this marriage, this illusion of trust and loyalty you've so carefully constructed while systematically tearing it apart. Her tears began to fall then, silent streams down her face that she didn't bother to wipe away. But I felt nothing for them. No sympathy, no regret, no pity. Just a hollow ache where love had once been. I've eliminated men for less, Juliana, I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. Her gasp was audible, a sharp intake of breath that seemed to echo in the stillness. And yet here you are sitting across from me alive and well. Do you know why? She shook her head, her lips trembling too much to form a coherent answer. Because I'm tired, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Tired of the lies, the betrayals, the endless cycle of hurt. Eliminating you might bring me satisfaction in the moment, but it wouldn't fix what's already broken. It wouldn't undo the years of deception or the pain of realizing I've been a fool. And most of all, it wouldn't heal the damage you've done to our family. At this, she broke down completely, her sobs racking her body as she buried her face in her hands. I watched her crumble, unmoved by her display of guilt or sorrow. In the past, I might have rushed to comfort her, to reassure her that everything would be okay, but not this time. I'm leaving, I said simply, the finality of the words hanging in the air. She looked up, her tear-streaked face a portrait of desperation and disbelief. You can't, she whispered, her voice hoarse. What about the kids? What about us? There is no us, I replied coldly. Not anymore. As for the kids, they're adults now. They'll understand in time, and they'll still have you, at least until they find out who you really are. But me? I can't stay. I won't. I set my glass down on the table with a deliberate motion, the sound of the glass meeting wood punctuating my decision. I'll be gone by morning. You'll hear from my lawyer soon enough. Until then, consider this your warning. Don't follow me. Don't call. Don't try to find me. Because if you do, Juliana, I'll show you just how far my patience can stretch. Her sobs grew louder as I walked away, leaving her alone with her shattered world. Upstairs, I packed a single bag, essentials only. The rest could stay. I had no use for the trappings of a life that no longer felt like mine. By the time the sun began to rise, I was already on the road, the villa shrinking in my rearview mirror until it was nothing more than a memory. A part of me wanted to look back, to see if she was standing in the doorway, watching me leave. But I didn't. I couldn't, because the man I'd been, the husband, the father, the fool, was gone. And in his place was someone new, someone free. The road stretched out before me, endless and full of possibilities. For the first time in years, I felt the faint stirrings of hope. Not for redemption, no, that was a luxury I didn't deserve, but for something simpler, something purer, a chance to start over. And so I drove, leaving behind the wreckage of a life that was never truly mine. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I would face it on my own terms, free from the shadows of betrayal and deceit. For better or worse, this was my story now, and it was far from over.